Chapter 12:15. The scene of Noguchi being torn apart and dragged away gave the players a strong urge to level up, both visually and spiritually. Even Ruoyu, who was second only to Brother Ju in terms of calmness, broke out in a cold sweat. The others were so scared that they could not even speak. Tisk, Brother Ju, who was the only one left who could still speak, said in a rather annoyed tone, "I haven't finished asking yet." Earlier, when the lockers suddenly burst open, Noguchi's body bounced out a little. This forced Feng Bujue to pull his hand back a little. It was at this moment that the dozens of hands tore Noguchi into pieces. Although Feng Bujue did not let go, in the end, not even a piece of clothing was left in his hands. Main mission triggered. Fortunately, after this terrifying scene, the main mission of this nightmare mode dungeon was finally refreshed. It could be said that it had been waiting for a long time. It's finally refreshed, Feng Bujue said as he focused on the game menu and opened the mission panel. The others in the team almost instinctively did the same almost as soon as they heard the system voice. Then, the line of words, "Escape from Chongjiu Elementary School," quickly entered everyone's sight. In fact, the content of this main mission was not surprising because in this kind of limited dungeon that took place in a claustrophobic environment, there was a high chance that escape from a certain location would be the goal. However, 2 seconds later, the system gave him a slightly surprising message. Hidden mission has been triggered. When a notification sounded, the players happened to be looking at the mission panel. So, they immediately saw the line of words, "Investigate the whereabouts of everyone in Year 2 class," appear in the category of hidden mission. Either there is no mission at all, or there is a hidden mission as well. Xiaotan saw this and thought. The hidden mission appeared most likely because the leader completed a certain specific condition. Xiaoling's mind was still very clear. She immediately continued. For example, deciphering certain information within a certain period of time, or pulling Noguchi out of the cabinet. Rei's speculation was quite reliable. According to the normal flow of the plot, when Noguchi came out of Suzuki's box to scare people, there would be 2 unfolding scenarios, except for the situation where the person who was caught would be scared off on the spot. First of all, if the player's wrist was not freed within 15 seconds, all the storage boxes would be opened, and the player would be dismembered by the dozens of hands. Then, all the doors closed, and the main mission was triggered. Secondly, as long as any player reacted within 15 seconds and used their flashlight to chase Noguchi away, Noguchi would immediately run away. After that, all the boxes closed, and the main mission was triggered. However, Feng Bujue had undoubtedly triggered the third situation. When he used the flashlight to suppress Noguchi, he also pulled the monster out of the cabinet. This kind of reaction was impossible for a normal person, but he did it naturally. That was why everyone saw the scene of Noguchi being dismembered. That was why the system directly tossed a hidden mission at them. That kind of thing doesn't matter. 2 seconds later, Phantom Dawn finished Xiaoling's sentence. But the problem is, what should we do now? The clues seem to have run out again. He was not wrong. The key to the lectern and the key to Noguchi's storage box had been used when they tried to unlock the door. After all, they had disappeared into white light. So far, the players only had the strange hair on the lectern, the Suzuki's flute, that Brother Ju had shoved into his shirt pocket, and an old newspaper. Brother Ju's suit had many pockets. However, these few items were temporarily useless. "No, it should be fine," Yuetchin said thoughtfully. "If I'm not mistaken, the doors and windows of the classroom can be opened now." Phantom Dawn was startled. He thought about it for a few seconds before realization dawned on him. "Oh, I get it now. The whole scenario that we've been through is actually the opening preparation time in a normal scenario, right?" "That's right," Yuetchin said darkly. "When the announcement says main mission has been triggered, the scenario will officially start. Then, the exit will naturally open." "Very good, since everyone understands it now," Feng Bujue said as he took his flashlight from Xiaotan and walked to the lectern. "Then, let's prepare to depart." He walked a few steps, and when he passed Phantom Dawn, he turned back to say, Oh, by the way, Phantom Dawn, you might as well leave your flashlight on. Based on the current situation, there are still too many surprises in this scenario. It is not safe to only use one flashlight in a group of 6, so after we leave this place, you will be responsible for covering the back of the group. Keep an eye on the situation behind the group. Air. When Phantom Dawn heard that, he looked troubled. Seriously, can I walk in the middle? I'll leave my flashlight to you guys. No. Feng Bujue answered him firmly and quickly. I refuse. Hey, you're not the leader of my club. Why should I listen to you? Phantom Dawn was obviously not satisfied. That's right, Brother Jew. I feel like you're being a bully. Xiaotan also spoke up for Phantom Dawn. Bully? Huh. Feng Bujue heard that and laughed. He had already grabbed his wig and walked to the door, but when he heard that, he turned around. Fine, then I'll be more polite. He walked back to Phantom Dawn and looked at him. I just have one question. Are you going to listen to me or not? Phantom Dawn was about to say no, but when the words reached his lips, he swallowed them back, and his expression changed. If you don't want to listen to me, then I'll really carry you through the scenario. Feng Bujue continued. If you don't want to stay behind, then don't. If you don't want to solve the puzzles, then don't. If you don't want to take the items, then don't take them. In any case, leave the things that you don't want to do to us. You only need to do what you want to do. How about that? Brother Jew was not just saying that for fun. From his tone and expression, it was clear that he meant what he said. However, Phantom Dawn did not accept this easy treatment. I know. I'm sorry. I'll stay behind. He not only rejected Brother Jew's suggestion, he even apologized to Brother Jew for the first time. Obviously, he understood the meaning behind Brother Jew's words, and that was why he reacted this way. Good, then we'll continue. Feng Bujue gave him a meaningful smile and then turned to move. What happened was as Inuetchin predicted. After the main quest was triggered, the doors and windows of the classroom could be opened and closed freely. After Feng Bujue inspected the doors and windows, he pulled open the horizontal classroom door and walked down the corridor. Different from the classroom, the floor of the corridor was made of cement. If one stepped on it forcefully, it would produce a clicking sound. Naturally, there were lights on the ceiling, but they were not on. Thankfully, with Feng Bujue leading the way, no matter how creepy the environment was, it did not affect the group's progress. Let's take a look at all the places that we can go before we enter the designated areas to explore, Brother Jew said to his teammates as he led the way. Even though he did not have to say anything, he knew that by saying a few words now and then, he would be able to calm the group down. After all, listening to Brother Jew's calm voice was better than waiting for fear to brew in the long silence. Just like that, with Brother Jew leading the way, the group started their exploration of Zhongjio Primary School. After walking out of the only door in Class A, Lin Sanju walked a few meters to the right and found Class B. She shone her flashlight into the classroom through the window and saw that Class B's classroom was filled with desks, chairs, and miscellaneous items. It was so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. When she touched the handrail of the classroom door, the notification she got was "cannot open." Continuing in that direction, they came to a corner not far away. On the wall of the corner, there was a very strange shrine. The shrine was made of stone. It was not big and had a simple design, but there was something strange about it. The thing inside the shrine was not Ksitigarbha or Buddha. Instead, it was a Japanese-style doll. The doll was about the size of a doll and wore a red kimono. It looked like a girl. Anyone who had seen this kind of Japanese doll would know that if this thing was placed in broad daylight, it would be fine to look at, but at night, in a dark environment, it would be inexplicably creepy. However, Feng Bujue did not care about that. When he saw the shrine, he asked his teammates to shine a flashlight on it. Then, he went forward to inspect it and came to the following conclusions. First, the doll was made of wood, but its hairs seemed to be real, and the clothes it was wearing were made of good material. Second, the doll was fixed to the shrine, and neither of them could be moved. Thirdly, after removing the mannequin's clothes, yes, Brother Jew removed them, one could see that the mannequin's torso was hollow. There were many rising and falling patterns inside the torso, like something could be embedded into it. After confirming all that, Feng Bujue continued his journey and led his teammates around the corner. After walking for a short while, the end of the corridor appeared in front of them. It was a door that looked like a door. When they tried to open the door, they would hear the prompt, "The exit is sealed by a dark force." Therefore, the exit of the school had been confirmed. At this point, the players had basically figured out the way to escape from this scenario. They probably needed to find one or more specific items and place them inside the mannequin's body to trigger some kind of mechanism or plot to open the door to the exit. After confirming the exit, Fong Bujue turned around and led his teammates back to where they came from. After turning around the corner, they soon arrived at the same place. Opposite Class A and Class B, there was a room across the corridor. It was the biology classroom. This classroom did not have a window facing the corridor, and the feedback on the door was that key required was the notification. Moving forward, there was a flight of stairs that led to the second floor. Fong Bujue did not go up for now. He shone his flashlight up the stairs and continued to move forward. Moving forward was the corridor on the left side after exiting Class A, and the two sides of this corridor were the music classroom, the teacher's office, and the toilet. The door to the music classroom could be pulled open directly, but when Fong Bujue realized that the door was not locked, he stopped because he had to be careful that the action of fully opening the door might trigger some kind of trigger. The door to the teacher's office also needed a key to open, so temporarily, it could not be opened. Lastly, there was the toilet, which had no door. There were two entrances to the toilet, and they led to the male and female toilets respectively. There was also a sink between the two entrances. As for what was inside the toilet, it was unclear because the entrances to the toilet were usually made in a zigzag pattern to prevent people from looking in from outside the door. "Okay, we're almost done exploring the first floor," Fong Bujue said. "Currently, the areas that we can explore are the music classroom and the toilet. From the fact that we found Suzuki's flute in the classroom, the normal process should be to head to the music classroom first." He paused. "Then, what do you guys think we should go to the music classroom next? The toilet or the second floor?" "I suggest we go to the music classroom." Xiao Tan was the first to speak, and he gave his reason honestly. "It feels like if we follow the normal process, it won't be so scary." "I agree." When Phantom Dawn heard that, he quickly added his agreement. In the 10 minutes earlier, Phantom Dawn had been responsible for observing the situation at the back of the team. Even though nothing had happened, the sense of terror that followed them like a shadow had not lessened, so he was still a coward. "Let's go to the music classroom. The main quest item is a very obvious hint." Xiao Ling chimed in. "In a dungeon at nightmare difficulty, it's best not to follow the plot. Otherwise, it's easy to die." In the end, Ruo Yu and Yuechin had similar thoughts. Seeing that his teammates had reached a consensus, Fong Bujue also agreed. Actually, for Brother Ju, it did not matter where they went. After all, it was just a game. 10 seconds later, Fong Bujue walked back to the door of the music classroom. He turned his head slightly to greet his teammates. "I'm going to pull the door open. Be careful." Then, he pulled the door open. Creak! Just as the door was fully opened, a long-haired female ghost that was hanging upside down dropped down from the inside of the door frame without any warning. She hung at the door and let out a piercing scream of agony. This was too sudden. The 5 people who stood behind Brother Ju all screamed in different degrees. Phantom Dawn's legs were weak, and he staggered back to the other side of the wall. He almost fell to the ground. "Oh, another one, huh?" At that moment, Fong Bujue was closest to the female ghost. Their faces were only 3 inches apart. This distance was more than enough for him to hurt, or rather, hurt the ghost. "Ha! Perfect timing." Chapter 12:16. Fong Bujue reached out with both hands, grabbed the female ghost by her armpits, and yanked her down. The moment she landed on the ground, the female ghost was stunned. Before she could react, a foot stepped on her shoulder, and, at the same time, a flashlight shone on her face. Gah! The monster's first reaction was to make a scary face and scream. But Fong Bujue did not buy it. Scream! His voice was louder than the ghost's. If screaming is going to work, then why do you need arms and legs? He was right. Even the monster realized that scaring was not going to work. Therefore, she suddenly turned around, pushed Brother Jew's foot away, and crawled away, disappearing into the darkness. Be it in terms of strength or agility, this ghost was much stronger than Noguchi, so Fonbujua was unable to stop her. When Brother Jew raised a flashlight to shine into the dark music room, the female ghost had already disappeared. She really is a monster. Seeing this, Fonbujua could not help but sigh. The ghosts in this scenario are all physical monsters that can be touched with our hands, but he paused, and his eyes darted around. At the same time, they also have the ability to enter an alternate dimension and quickly become invisible. Have you thought of something? Ruwa, you noticed something from the slight change in her Brother Jew's expression, so she asked. I was thinking, could there be such a setting? Fonbujua said. The few of us are actually ghosts as well. When that was said, everyone was startled. And Yuachin was the first to chime in. Now that you mention it, it does seem possible. Indeed, the narration implanted a preconceived notion in us, and that created a blind spot in our thinking. Xiao Ling added, if the leader's speculation is correct, then it explains why we can physically interact with the ghosts. That's not right. By then, Phantom Dawn, who had been scared out of his wits earlier, had slowly recovered. Even though he had almost disconnected from the shock earlier, he still caught up to the group's train of thought. He walked over to ask, then why? He scanned the group with the flashlight and asked, why are none of us affected by the light? About that, Fonbujua scratched his chin. This is what I think. He looked around at his teammates and continued. The six of us are people who have just become ghosts. We have not fully assimilated into the world of the dead, so we are not that afraid of the light yet. But the ghosts that we have encountered have been dead for many years already. They are already part of the world of darkness, so... Fonbujua paused. As expected of a novelist, to be able to make it sound so convincing even when there's basically no evidence to back it up. Rainey listened and immediately gave a very pertinent comment. Sigh, like I said, it's just speculation. Fonbujua shrugged. The main reason I'm telling you this is to provide you with a new way of thinking. If I die because of some kind of death flag, at least my intelligence will protect you. I feel like your intelligence is always trying to trick me and not protect me, Phantom Dawn said with a sigh. That basically summed up what had happened to him after he ran into Brother Jew in tournament for the best S2. You flatter me. Fonbujua heard that and replied with a smile. Is that a compliment? Can you hear the compliment in my voice? Phantom Dawn was once again shocked by Brother Jew's shamelessness. The way he took pride in the fact that he was being mocked really made him speechless. There was a saying, you cannot wake up a person who was pretending to be asleep. Similarly, you could not insult a person who is truly shameless. All right, guys, since the ghost has disappeared, let's start the search, Fonbujua said as he walked through the door and prepared to start the search that he was best at. The others followed closely behind him. They turned on their flashlights and split up to investigate. The music room was not big, and the four walls were covered with old, yellowed wallpaper. In the corner of the room was a piano and a matching piano stool. Next to it was a simple, standing music stand. In the middle of the room were some square, colored stools with numbers printed on them. From the size and style, one could tell that they were meant for children. On the opposite wall from the door, there was a relatively large cupboard. Even though it was also made of wood, with the nature of this kind of puzzle-type scenario, even if it was made of paper, as long as one did not meet the requirements to open it, one would not be able to open it. The players started their search in this environment. Due to the limited space, in just 5 minutes, they had investigated everything that they could. The results were as follows. 1. There was nothing hidden inside the piano, and it could be played normally. 2. There was nothing wrong with the piano stool. 3. There was a yellowed, broken music score sitting on the music stand, but there were still a few bars that could be identified. 4. There were exactly 9 stools, and they were written with Arabic numerals 1 to 9. After inspection, the stools were all solid and fixed to the ground. 5. There were no obvious abnormalities, patterns, or clues found on the wallpaper. The wallpaper was confirmed by Fonbujua. 6. When the players touched the cupboard door, they got the hint that it was sealed by some kind of dark power. After confirming the above 6 points, the players gathered together and had a brief discussion. They then reduced the number of flashlights to 2. Okay, Fong Bujue said, "We've checked everything that we can. Now we can only use this." When he said that, he took out Suzuki's flute from his pocket. The item states that only male players can play it, so he turned to look at Xiao Tan and Phantom Dawn. "Who's going to play it?" "Air. I don't know how to play a stringed instrument," Xiao Tan said professionally. It was worth mentioning that before he was in 3rd grade, Xiao Tan had indeed studied music. Of course, for a rich kid like him, he would not study music for the sake of extra marks in exams. The reason Xiao Tan chose to study music was because his parents thought he had talent. So, where did this talent come from? It was like this. When Xiao Tan was in kindergarten, there was a period of time when he liked to bang on things. Therefore, his parents used that as an excuse to send him, who was not even 7 years old, to take percussion lessons. He studied for 2.5 years. Xiaodan did not say anything, but the teacher could not take it anymore. The teacher admitted, "The child is tone deaf, and he has no sense of rhythm. In the future, you'll be lucky if he can find a right tune when he sings karaoke. You should find someone else." Just like that, Wang Tanji ended his 29-month career as a children's drummer. The final result of his studies was he learned to play a few basic drum beats, trained his left hand to be as nimble as his right hand, and cured his habit of banging on things. "I know how to play the harmonica." After Xiao Tan, this was Phantom Dawn's answer. Fong Bujue saw that neither of them knew how to play, so he said casually and raised the flute to his lips, "Is that so? Then I'll do it." "So, you know how to play? Then why did you ask?" Phantom Dawn grumbled. Seeing that, and Yueqin raised her brow in surprise. "You know how to play a musical instrument? That can't be right." However, Ruo Yu had a suspicious look on her face. She turned to Yueqin and said, "I've stayed at his place for so long, and I've never seen any music in his house." Woo! Before they could finish, Brother Ju started to play. Woo! Woo! Gee! Foo-foo! Woo! Gee! His playing was completely out of tune. Sometimes he was out of breath, and sometimes he was making a very sharp sound. His fingers were just randomly pressing on the holes of the flute in an inexplicable way, messing around. "Hey, so you don't know how to play the instrument?" Phantom Dawn gasped. Not only that, even an outsider can play the instrument so badly. Where does your confidence come from? Stop wasting time. After all, none of us know how to play the instrument, so it doesn't matter who plays it, right? Fong Bujue retorted immediately. After that, he continued to play, as if there was no one else around. Even though Phantom Dawn wanted to complain, he had to admit, Brother Ju had a point. None of the 3 boys knew how to play the instrument, so it didn't matter who played it. Therefore, the group endured Brother Ju's mental pollution for another minute. For some reason, 1 minute later, suddenly, with a loud creak, the sliding door of the music room closed on its own. Then, a woman's voice echoed in the space. "Everyone, go to your seats. The teacher is about to start playing." "What's going on? Are you farming monsters again?" Phantom Dawn used his flashlight to scan the room, but he saw nothing. The source of the voice was also uncertain, and it was hard to tell. "This should be a hint," Fong Bujue said calmly. "Follow the voice's instructions, and the next part of the plot will be triggered. Then shall we go and sit down?" Xiao Tan said as he turned to look at the square chairs. "It's not that simple." Xiao Ling's expression darkened slightly as she continued. "The numbers written on these chairs clearly mean something. Furthermore, the voice just now also said that we should sit in our own seats. In other words, Ruo Yu finished for her. If someone sits on the wrong seat, something bad might happen. Hey, it's one thing for Fong Bujue to scare us, but how can you guys say something so scary as well?" When Phantom Dawn heard the word bad, he started to panic again. This is a real problem. No matter how scary it is, we have to face it and solve it. Brother Ju smiled and added, "But there's no need to worry too much. The problem with the seating. I noticed it not long after I entered this room." "What? You've solved the puzzle?" Phantom Dawn thought about it for a few seconds and then said loudly, "Oh, I know now. It's based on the seating order in the classroom, right? In other words, the first person on the first row is 1, the second person is 2, and so on." That's not right. The next second, before Brother Jew could say anything, Xiao Ling denied Phantom Dawn's answer. "How do you know the seating order should be from left to right and from top to bottom?" And Yuachin added, "Yes. You've seen Noguchi Eiji's diary, right? It was written from top to bottom and from right to left. What if the seating order is based on that?" Furthermore, Ruoyu added, "Even if the seating order is based on top left is first, there might be a pattern like the first person on the first row is 1, and the first person on the second row is 2. Once they said that, Phantom Dawn lost confidence in his answer. He turned to look at Brother Jew with a questioning gaze. "Fine. I'd rather hear your answer. I think the order here should be based on the 9 palaces." Feng Bujue agreed. "When we were in the second-year class, I was already curious about the arrangement of the tables and chairs. The 3x3 seats correspond to the 9 boxes inside the lockers. It seems to be hinting at that. But until we left the classroom, there was no puzzle related to the 9 palaces." He paused for half a second before turning his gaze to the 9 square chairs not far away. "But after we arrived here and saw these 9 numbers, it reminded me of that game." "Wait a minute," Phantom Dawn interjected. "The Jogon that you mentioned is a number game where every axis adds up to 15, right? The position of the numbers in that kind of picture is not fixed, right?" 1 second later, Xiaoling used a formula to answer Phantom Dawn's question. "Where 9, walk 1, 3 on the left, 7 on the right, 2 and 4 on the shoulder, 8 and 6 on the foot, and 5 in the center. You heard that, right? There is a so-called standard form." Feng Buju added, "In any case, if we arrange it according to the 9 palaces, I am 5, and you are 7. Passing Rain, Han Jian, and Laughing Soul, Brother Jew, still used as friends in-game nicknames when he was with Phantom Dawn, are 4, 9, and 2 respectively, and Xiao Tan, but Brother Jew has always referred to Xiao Tan as such, is 1. Phantom Dawn thought about it. "Do you have confidence in this arrangement? At least, it is more confident than the arrangement from left to right or top to bottom." Feng Bujue replied, "But I understand your concern because there is indeed a lack of evidence for this riddle. I think we must have missed some clues before, because according to the information we have now, even I can't find any clear evidence to point out which 6 of us correspond to which 6 seats." Brother Jew had his reasons for saying that. The scenario that he had come up with was far more than anyone else there. Take the names of the 9 students from Year 2 Class A as an example. Their romanization, pseudonyms, strokes, radicals, relationships with metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, even famous people with the same surname. Brother Jew had considered all of them. He had gone through the rest of the analysis based on this. With that as the basis, Feng Bujue had said something like based on the current information we have. However, the current situation did not allow the players to look for more clues. "Didn't you hear me? I told you to sit properly." Just as the group was hesitating, the voice spoke again, and this time it was more vicious and sinister than before. Chapter 12:17. "Come and sit down. Everyone is rushing us." Feng Bujue said, "After all, we won't be able to come up with a better answer in such a short amount of time. If we stand, we might trigger a team wipe scenario, so we might as well sit down and give it a try." When he said this, he was already walking towards the square stool with a number 5 written on it. 1 second later, Ruoyu was the first to follow without much thought. Seeing that, the others slowly moved to the seats that Feng Bujue had mentioned earlier and sat down on the seats that corresponded to the numbers. Just as everyone sat down, there was a ding. The piano in the corner of the room started to play on its own. Then, the 88 keys started to move on their own without anyone playing them. From this development, Brother Jew's deduction should be spot on, and the plot started to move forward. In the next 3 to 4 minutes, the unmanned piano began to play a highly skilled solo. The melody was not complicated, but the performance was still very infectious. Although it was just pure music without any lyrics, the players felt as if they were listening to a singer singing in a low voice. The depressing and gloomy feeling was completely conveyed through the music, and it infected everyone in the room. About 4 minutes later, the nameless piano piece came to an abrupt end. As the music lingered, the voice spoke again. "Did you hear that? Which one of you would like to play according to the score?" This request reminded us of a question that we often heard in class when we were young. Which one of you would like to solve this question? Whenever we heard that, we would instinctively use misdirection and chant in our hearts, "You can't see me. You can't see me. You can't see me." However, reality proved that this self-deceiving skill was useless. "I'll do it." 2 seconds later, Inuetchin stood up to volunteer. "I have studied piano for a few years." At this moment, she was just like those straight-A students in our memories who saved the entire class from calamity, stepping forward bravely. Oh, this big sister Hanjian sure is reliable. Seeing that someone had volunteered, Phantom Dawn sighed in relief and complimented the girl. "TSK, I know how to play the piano as well," Feng Bujue said in a disapproving tone. "What? You know how to play the piano?" Phantom Dawn turned to look at him with disbelief. "Yeah, Brother Ju can play the Ode to Joy single-handedly just by looking at the sheet music." Xiaotan mercilessly exposed the essence of Brother Ju's words. "Hey, do you have any shame?" When Phantom Dawn heard that, he turned to mock Brother Ju. "You're even more arrogant than those people who only know how to use two-finger tap and claim that they know how to type." While the three boys were fooling around, and Yuichin had already sat down in front of the piano. After all, he had learned it before. When he sat on the zither stool, his posture and gaze changed. "Wait a minute. I haven't touched the piano for so long. I need to look at the sheet music and prepare." After Yuichin sat down, she reached out to grab the sheet music from the stand and placed it on the piano. Then, she greeted her teammates. The music score on the music stand recorded the song she had just played. As mentioned earlier, the music score was incomplete. Only a few bars could be seen on it, and this coincided with the mission requirement of play a part. "Why haven't you started? Haven't you learned how to play the piano?" And Yuichin waited for about 30 seconds before the creepy female voice urged her again. It sounded like she would not survive if she did not play. "Fine. Looks like something bad will happen if I don't play now." Seeing this, Yuichin had no choice but to do it. The next second, she reached out her hands, clenched them into fists, and cracked her knuckles. Then, she took a deep breath and started to play. Soon, a melody was slowly born with the rhythm of her fingertips. Of course, the players still remembered that this was a part of the long piano piece. But when Yuichin played it, the feeling was completely different from the previous one. Music. As long as there was a slight difference in skill, emotion, and talent, the finished product would be very different. And this difference, or uniqueness, and irreproducibility that was created by people was the charm of all art. It did not take long for Yuichin to finish playing the few bars on the sheet music. Before the music disappeared, the voice said, "So, you pass." Then class dismissed. Bang! Just as she said the word class, the large cupboard behind them suddenly made a strange sound and opened on its own. The sound came so suddenly that Phantom Dawn had jumped up from the shock. However, as he turned to look at the cupboard, 2 more slaps came from the other side. He looked left and right, and he had a hard time keeping up with the commotion. But actually, the sound from the other side was nothing. It was the sound of the music room's door opening again. Looks like the mystery of this room ends here. Feng Bujue was still calm. He did not care about what was happening at the door. The flashlight in his hand shone steadily on the cupboard by the wall. By then, the cupboard door had opened, and the thing inside was revealed. Inside the huge cabinet, there was a skeleton lying on the ground. Even though the body was still wearing clothes, they had already turned into white bones. From the attire, this appeared to be the female ghost that Brother Ju had met at the door earlier. "She can't still move, right?" Xiaoling looked at the skeleton for a few seconds and asked a very constructive question. "So what if she can move?" Feng Bujue said as he walked toward the cupboard. She is just a skeleton. If she dares to move, I'll use the piano to chop her off. Hey, you using the piano to chop a tiger's head. Phantom Dawn also realized that many times, with just one sentence from Feng Bujue, he could pull his teammates' attention away from the scary thing and onto some kind of joke. I'm just giving you a suggestion, Feng Bujue said. To be honest, using the piano is not a good idea. Using the car door to chop the head off is the correct way to do it. At this point, he started to search the body. Feng Bujue searched carefully. If not for the system, he probably would have stripped the skeleton naked. To cut the long story short, in the end he found 4 things. One of them was a quest item name, pentagram sunglasses item type, plot item quality, normal function, unknown can be taken out of the scenario. Yes remark, a pair of retro-styled sunglasses. Compared to the wig, this item that could be taken out of the scenario was even more baffling. If the scenario was set in an American disco in the 80s, it would not have been out of place to find something like this. But in a primary school during the Showa era, who would have thought something like this would appear? Then, there was the second item. This was also a quest item. Item name, its lungs item type, plot item quality, normal function, can be embedded into its body. Can be taken out of the scenario. No remark. A small organ made from green jade. It is radiating with spiritual energy. The description of this item clearly stated its purpose. This was one of the items to unlock the shrine dolls near the exit. Then, the third item was a piece of paper. It was a crumpled piece of paper, and it was about the size of a picture. There was a sentence written on it, "My best student at the 3000 nunnery." She reminded me of my childhood. Based on what had happened in the classroom, this should have been written by the skeleton before she died, and her identity was most likely the music teacher of this school. Finally, the fourth item was the biology classroom key. This key clearly pointed the players to their next destination. There is no item description on this piece of paper. Feng Bujue took out the 4 items one by one and said, in other words, the words on this paper are either some kind of hint or used to complete the scenario. I feel like the chance of completing the scenario is higher, and Yuechin said. And Yuechin continued. When the system generated the script and assigned the characters, it must have taken into account that I can play the piano. So, after I used this ability to solve the puzzle, we found a piece of paper and added the setting that the character of 3000 Nunnery has musical talent. Perhaps, Feng Bujue said as he shoved the paper into his shirt pocket. But it's fine if it's just a hint. We just need to remember it. Then, he shoved the other items into his shirt pocket and snapped his fingers. He pointed at the door and said, "Let's go to the next room." At that moment, the other 5 came to a consensus and opened up a path. Obviously, after the series of events, the players had a better understanding of the overall style and horror of this scenario. So, they all agreed that it was better for Brother Ju to take the lead. To cut the long story short, 2 minutes later, the group arrived at the door of the biology classroom. When Feng Bujue inserted the key into the keyhole, the 5 people behind him had their hearts in their throats. They were all prepared to be scared by this sudden turn of events. Bang, bang. Brother Ju calmly opened the door. When the key dissolved into white light and disappeared, he pulled the door open. But in the end, nothing happened. At least in terms of visual and auditory senses, there was no shocking scene. But what does that smell? Phantom Dawn was the first to speak again. One had to admit that even though his puzzle-solving skills were not that good, his reaction was fast, and his senses were sharp. It's some kind of many kinds of expired organic solvents. This time, it was Wang Tanji who answered him. "Ha! No wonder you're Dr. Wang. You managed to calm down after smelling something like that?" Feng Bujue half-jokingly turned back to tell Xiao Tan. Yes. Xiao Tan thought about it and realized that it was indeed the case. Very good, then let's move on. As Feng Bujue spoke, he walked through the door, and the investigation of the biology classroom began. The biology classroom was the smallest room that they had been in so far. There was a rectangular lab table in the middle of the room. From the height of the table, the primary school students had to stand to operate it. Perhaps because of that, There were no seats in the room. There were exhibits placed on both sides of the classroom. They were mostly soaked or dried specimens. There were pictures of animals pasted on the walls, and the pictures had simple introductions. There was a sink in the corner of the classroom, and that was where the strange smell in the room came from. This time, the players were extra careful when they investigated the classroom. There were two reasons for this. First, when they opened the door, they didn't trigger any scary events. Instead, it made the players feel uneasy. Second, Xiao Tan reminded them that expired organic solvents were not only harmful to the body, but they could also cause fires. Therefore, after about 10 minutes, the players completed their investigation of the biology classroom. The results were as follows. Firstly, the drawers around the experiment table could not be opened. Various tools, including scalpels, were placed messily on the table. There were also more than 10 different kinds of solutions. However, the words on the bottles that contained the solutions were blurred. It was difficult to determine the nature of the solution. Second, the specimens around the lab table were all normal. Third, they couldn't find any clues from the pictures on the wall, but Brother Ju still managed to read and memorize the contents. Fourth, although the classroom didn't have windows facing the corridor, there were windows facing the outside of the school. Through the window glass, they could see the country roads, electric poles, and trees under the moonlight. Everything seemed so peaceful and normal. It was a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the school. Of course, these two windows were sealed by the power of darkness, so they were unbreakable. Fifth, the drain of the sink was obviously blocked. A lot of dirty liquid had accumulated in the sink, and they couldn't see the bottom of the sink. The only faucet could be turned on, but there was no water coming out of the pipe. Okay, everyone, please turn off the flashlights. After the investigation and communication, the decision naturally fell on Brother Ju's shoulders. He was silent for half a second before he said, "As everyone can see, none of the tools on the lab table are items related to the plot. So if we were to talk about what kind of clues we can find in this classroom." At this point, Feng Bujue turned his gaze to the sink. His intention was clear. "You can't see me. You can't see me." At that moment, Phantom Dawn was chanting the mantra in his heart and using misdirection mentally. But at that moment, let me do it. Xiaotan volunteered to do it. Chapter 12:18. Before Xiaotan said that, Phantom Dawn had thought that Xiaotan was just like him, the type who could only do whatever he wanted in a limited scenario. But soon, Phantom Dawn's opinion changed. After all, the puzzle-solving part has been handled by you guys. So far, I haven't been of much help, so Xiaotan said as he walked to the sink. "Leave this kind of dirty and tiring work to me." He did not think much of what he said, and Brother Ju did not think much of it either. But when it fell into Phantom Dawn's ears, it was quite grating. Even though Phantom Dawn had contributed a lot to the team, at the end of the day, it was Brother Ju who had asked him to do it, and he had been very reluctant to accept it. Earlier, when Feng Bujue told Phantom Dawn, the meaning behind his words had been, "Since you have chosen to run away from your weakness, then we can accommodate you and help you clear the scenario if you think that is appropriate." Phantom Dawn had understood the meaning behind Brother Ju's words, and that was why he had said that, "I'm sorry," and accepted the job of bringing up the rear for the team. However, under the guidance of Brother Ju, he had forced himself to face his fear. In reality, his mind was still running away from it. Until this moment, when he saw Xiaotan, who was just as cowardly as he was, step forward to explore the sink that was filled with filth, the stench, and could trigger some kind of scary event at any moment. Phantom Dawn suddenly felt ashamed. He instantly realized that there was no such thing as being good at this kind of scenario. Running away from something that you're not good at or don't like, and waiting for others to help you deal with the aftermath, is the way children deal with things. Adults, on the other hand, have to be responsible. They can't run away from difficulties. No matter what kind of situation you encounter, you have to at least do the part that you are able to do well. Of course, there was an objective fact. Phantom Dawn was still underage. However, among his peers, he was the kind of child who was especially competitive. That was undeniable. It's sticky and slippery. After searching for half a minute, Xiao Tan grumbled with a conflicted expression. You don't need to describe it to us, really. Xiao Ling made a disgusted expression and stood behind him. That sounds like a description of mucus. Feng Bujue, on the other hand, acted like he was not disgusted enough and added in a malicious tone. No, it doesn't sound like mucus, but it does. Xiao Tan answered Brother Ju seriously. Something like swill. The topic did not continue because after Xiao Tan said that there was a bubbling sound and a few bubbles rose from the liquid in the sink. Then, the dirty water slowly flowed into the drain. Phew! 2 seconds later, Xiao Tan sighed in relief. He turned around to tell the group, I've found the cause of the blockage. As he spoke, he raised his right hand to show an oval object to the group. This is Xiao Ling, who was closest to him, pinched her nose and leaned closer to take a look. A soapbox. Indeed, it was a soapbox, and it was the old-fashioned kind. It was basically an oval plastic box that could be separated into 2 parts. I think so too. After hearing what Xiao Ling said, Xiao Tan wanted to say something. But at that moment, something unexpected happened. From a sink behind him, from the small drain, a hand reached out to grab Xiao Tan's waist. At that moment, everyone's attention was focused on the soapbox that Xiao Tan was holding, so this sudden attack caught everyone by surprise. Half a second later, Ruo Yu was the first to react, but since she was standing further away from the sink, she could not reach it even if she wanted to. However, she still made the correct decision. She immediately turned on her flashlight and aimed it into the sink. Feng Bujue and Phantom Dawn's reaction was slower than Ruo Yu's. The former was standing further away, too far to reach, but Phantom Dawn was standing right next to Xiao Tan. Pooh! 1 second later, there was a dull thud. In that split second, there was a flash of blood. A piece of flesh on the right side of Xiao Tan's waist was sliced away by the hand. With a grunt from the pain, he staggered several steps forward. At the same time, Phantom Dawn's hand clamped around the monster's forearm. Beep! It was unclear what Feng Bujue cursed. In any case, following that curse, he charged forward, and a pair of large scissors appeared in his hands. At that moment, everything happened. The arm that was grabbed by Phantom Dawn could not be pulled back. Brother Ju saw the opportunity and raised the scissors to stab at the arm. Clang! How vicious was Brother Ju's attack? With a stab, the scissors directly penetrated the arm and hit the bottom of the metal sink heavily, making 2 loud noises. Then, a muffled groan came from the pipe at the bottom of the sink, as if the monster hiding in the drainage pipe was shouting. Are you all right? As Feng Bujue used the scissors to cut open the monster's wound, he turned around to ask Xiao Tan in a relatively calm tone. I'm fine. By then, Xiao Tan's hair was dripping with sweat, but his expression was surprisingly calm. My internal organs are not damaged, and the loss of life points is only 28%. I just need to deal with the bleeding status. It's nothing serious. Okay. With that answer, Brother Ju sighed in relief. Then, he started to deal with the arm. Then, I believe everyone is curious as to how this thing managed to hide inside the pipe. When Feng Bujue said that, he gave Phantom Dawn a look. For some reason, even though Phantom Dawn was not that familiar with Brother Ju, he understood what Brother Ju meant. Air, I'll leave it to you. Phantom Dawn let go of the monster's forearm and moved away from the sink. Just as he took several steps back, Feng Bujue made his move. Brother Ju pulled out the scissors and tossed them to the side. Then, he jumped onto the sink. His feet stepped on the edge of the sink, and his hands gripped the monster's forearm tightly. You sure are strong. Feng Bujue pulled like he was pulling a giant carrot. He used this exaggerated posture to pull on the arm, and that was what he said through his gritted teeth. As for the monster, it was screaming with every blow that Brother Ju delivered. Let me help. After that strange tug-of-war lasted for 30 seconds, Ruo Yu placed the flashlight on the table and walked forward to grab Brother Ju's waist. At this moment, the others were a little stunned. They did not know the meaning and result of doing this. No matter what, with the size of the drain, it was impossible for a human head to pass through, let alone a torso. Therefore, from an outsider's perspective, Feng Bujue was purposely torturing the monster to avenge Xiao Tan, and Ruoyu appeared to be trying to help Brother Ju, no matter what he was doing. Logically speaking, based on common sense, the result of their tugging would be to tear off the monster's arm. The question was, where would it be? When would it be torn off? And what would happen if it was torn off? However, to everyone's surprise, what happened next shocked them. After 15 seconds of this cruel tugging, a strange sound was heard, and a strange substance with a diameter similar to the pipe was pulled out of the sink. That substance was about the same size as the monster's arm, but it looked very strange. If one had to describe it, it was like stuffing a living person into a framing bag, the kind used for framing cakes with cream, and then squeezing it out of a framing bag that was smaller than the opening of a bowl. In the end, it was squeezed out in a noodle-like state. Its internal organs, flesh, and bones were all twisted together into a single strand. It was pulled out from the back of the monster's arm and dragged for about 5 meters before it was thrown on the ground. When they saw this scene, everyone fell silent. It was mainly because this thing was really disgusting. Just looking at it made them want to vomit, let alone comment on it. However, Feng Bujue definitely had something to say. The good news is that we should have killed this monster. He paused for a while. The bad news is that it doesn't seem to be able to provide us with any more information. I have a feeling. Ruoyu, who had helped him, added, the nature of this monster is similar to the one we encountered at the entrance of the music room. We just need to force it to retreat. There's no need to go to this extent. Hey, you weren't careless when you attacked. Feng Bujue turned around and said, I saw that you seemed to be unable to hold on any longer, so I came to help you. Ruoyu said coldly, besides, I wasn't sure what would happen if you did that. Fine. Feng Bujue shrugged and turned to Xiao Tan. Then, Xiao Tan, how are your wounds? While Brother Ju and Ruoyu were killing the monster, Xiao Tan did not stay idle. He used the gauze and tape on the lab table to perform emergency treatment on his wounds and stop the bleeding. It hurts. Xiao Tan's answer was very direct. But my life points have stopped dropping, and it doesn't affect my movement that much. At this point, he sighed. Sigh. Now that I think about it, I was too careless. In that situation, there was a high chance of triggering a dangerous scenario, but I overlooked that and showed you the soapbox directly. If I had been more cautious and waited until all the dirty water had flowed out, confirmed that there was no abnormality, or just took a few steps back before talking to you guys, then this wouldn't have happened. No, I am responsible as well. Then, Phantom Dawn suddenly interrupted Xiao Tan and said, when the hand appeared, I was spooked again. If I had reacted normally, I would have grabbed the hand faster. At least, I could have turned the flashlight around and aimed it at the hand. That way, your injuries wouldn't have been so serious. In fact, you might not have been injured at all. This time, your thought process is quite clear. Feng Bujue heard that and turned to Phantom Dawn. He looked at him with a half-smile. Not bad, not bad. You are a promising student. Stop wasting time. Even if I wanted to find a life coach, I wouldn't have come to you. Phantom Dawn rolled his eyes at Brother Ju and said so. When he said that, his tone was strange. To give an inappropriate example, it sounded like he was saying no. I didn't plan to be anyone's life coach to begin with. Feng Bujue laughed. Oh, by the way, if you really want to find a life coach, I think hot and sour is quite suitable. Brother Ju poked fun at Brother Zen. Just based on his statement, don't judge me by my current state. I used to be this and this. I can see that he is someone with a story. All right, who was the one who said earlier that he needed to conserve the flashlight's power? How long do you two plan to bicker? And Yuechin was a reliable person. She knew that if Brother Ju started his bickering mode, there would be no end to this conversation. Fine. Since the monster is dead, let's continue to look for clues. Feng Bujue walked to the side of the table and opened the soapbox that Xiao Tan had placed on the table without hesitation. However, the contents of the box were inconceivable. When Phantom Dawn saw the box, he mumbled, "Why is there a dead frog inside?" His question was soon answered. Please follow the lecture notes to dissect this frog in 20 minutes. The system said when the frog appeared. At the same time, there was a click and, one of the drawers that could not be opened around the table suddenly popped out on its own. Without a doubt, the lecture notes mentioned by the system were inside this drawer. This time, the system is giving us a direct order. It's not like the music room earlier, where the ghost came to urge us. Phone Bujue scratched his chin and said, "Is this because the ghost in this room has been made into spaghetti? Hey, is this the time to be concerned about that?" When Phantom Dawn heard the system announcement, his face shifted and his voice rose. "I once dissected a frog in biology class. I remember it took me 1.5 hours to finish it." "You are," Phone Bujue said as he turned to look at Xiao Tan with pride. "We have a professional here." Xiao Ling was even more direct. Before Brother Ju finished, she had already pulled out the lecture notes from the drawer and placed them before Xiao Tan. "Good luck." Xiao Ling nudged Xiao Tan on his arm. "But if the wound hurts, don't force yourself. I can help you." "Huh, that won't be necessary." When Xiao Tan said that, his eyes and presence changed. "I could dissect something with my feet." Chapter 12:19. There is only a list of requirements in the lecture notes. There were no specific steps for dissecting a frog. However, Xiao Tan did not need to look at the steps. Dr. Wang did not study in medical school for nothing. He could dissect a human being, let alone a frog. After spending 10 seconds skimming through the contents of the lecture notes, Wang Tanji immediately became serious. He spoke to Xiao Ling in a commanding tone. "Xiao Ling, use the flashlight and shine it on me." "Okay." Xiao Ling obediently did as she was told. She had no intention of arguing with Xiao Tan. After that, Xiao Tan raised his head and looked at the experiment table. His eyes moved quickly, and he quickly confirmed the location of all the necessities. Then, he walked around the experiment table, put all the necessary tools on a metal tray, and returned to his original position. "Time is tight, so I'll start now." When Xiao Tan said this, Xiao Ling had already raised the flashlight in her hand and shone it steadily on the table in front of Xiao Tan. The dissection work began in full swing. Xiao Tan placed the metal tray with the tools on his right side and placed another tray with paraffin in front of him. He then used a tack to fix the frog's carcass with its belly facing up on the surface of the paraffin. Then, he picked up a scalpel and cut into the frog without hesitation. His hands were very steady, so steady that you would think that they were not human hands, but some kind of precision machine. This was not a bonus or ability in the game. This was something that Wang Tanji could do in real life, and he was very good at it. 2 seconds later, Xiao Tan used the lower jaw as a limit and cut open the frog's stomach from top to bottom. This cut, if it was light, it could not completely cut open the abdominal cavity. If it was heavy, it could easily damage the internal muscles. Xiao Tan's strength was just right. It could be said that he used the fastest and most perfect method to cut open a flat and straight wound. The muscles are all normal. After peeling away the skin, Xiao Tan only glanced at it before he said that. Then he sliced open the flesh as well. Do you need us to help you record these items?" At this time, Inuit also came over to take a look at the lecture notes. She found that there were a lot of items that needed to be confirmed, so she asked. "It's fine, I could do it myself," Xiao Tan replied without raising her head. "Although it looks complicated, most of the things that need to be confirmed are clear at a glance. I have already checked all the external organs when I fix the corpse. Now all I need to do is to remove the internal organs one by one. Lastly, I need to deal with the spine and brain." "Oh, then good luck." And Yueqi noticed that after Xiao Tan picked up the scalpel, he became more confident and strong. It felt as if she was talking to a stranger, and it was difficult for her to continue the conversation. Time ticked by, but the 5 people around him did not feel nervous at all. This was because Wang Tanji looked unprecedentedly reliable. His technique was skillful, his gaze was firm, and his movements were as smooth as flowing water. There was no trace of hesitation or hesitation. Sure enough, it only took him 15 minutes to complete all the requirements on the lecture notes and confirm all the items that needed to be confirmed. On the table, there was a set of frog skin that had been cut open, a pile of muscle tissue, and organs and bones that were placed in more than 10 plastic containers. No matter which part it was, all of them were in a relatively complete state. It looked like they could be immediately sealed up and used as specimens. It could be said that Xiao Tan's dissection work was done neatly and precisely. If it was recorded, it could be used as an educational video. Even a layman could see how good he was. Dissection complete. Time and completion rate meet the standards. When Xiao Tan's hand stopped, the system announced. The next second, another drawer popped out from the side of the table. Obviously, it contained the mission items that they would need. At that moment, Xiao Tan sighed deeply, and his expression returned to its usual dazed state. When he put down the tools in his hands, Xiao Tan frowned slightly. It was fine when I was focused earlier, but now that I've relaxed, the wound is starting to hurt again. Are you okay? Did the wound tear open? Xiao Ling asked with concern. It won't tear open. I'm the one who took care of that myself, Xiao Tan replied. Even in July and August, I was sent to the ER emergency room every few days to help out. I'm very good at dealing with external injuries. Brother Xiao Tan, you're a doctor? When Phantom Dawn heard that, it dawned on him. Yes, Wang Tanji replied, but I'm still doing my internship. Impressive, Phantom Dawn added. I thought Feng Bujue was joking when he said Dr. Wang, but it's true. Ha! There's nothing impressive about it. Xiao Tan laughed sheepishly. What's wrong? You sound like you admire doctors a lot, Feng Bujue said. That's right. Since I was young, my parents have been telling me to become a doctor or a lawyer when I grow up. Even though based on the current situation, it looks like I won't be following either of those paths. I do have some understanding of the things that I need to learn in order to pursue these two professions. So, the admiration naturally comes from the bottom of my heart, Phantom Dawn said. Ha! After all, young people are too naive. Feng Bujue laughed when he heard that. There are many scums in these two professions. I know quite a few of them, for example. That's enough. Let's stop here. Ruo, you seem to know what Brother Ju was going to say next, so she quickly stopped him. There's no need to share the stories about the doctors who were driven mad by you and the lawyers who were driven mad by you and Ouyang Ruo. It's not something to be proud of. That's right. When Phantom Dawn heard Ruo, he quickly added, I don't want to get to know you too well, and I don't want to care about the medical disputes and civil lawsuits that you, Feng Bujue, are involved in. Don't think you can use your stories to corrupt my morals. Even though he was mocking Brother Ju, he had a point. Fine. Brother Ju laughed drily, and disappointment crossed his eyes. He sighed. After all, it's your loss. Then, he turned to walk toward the drawer that popped up. Then, let's continue the plot. 5 minutes later, the players returned to the door of the toilet. In these 5 minutes, they looked at the items they had obtained and discussed the next step of their plan. First, it was time to talk about the items that they had obtained from the drawer in the biology classroom. Similar to the music classroom, after solving the puzzle in a room, they had obtained 4 items. First, it was a mission item that felt rather out of place and could be taken out of the scenario. Item name, cowboy boots item type, plot item quality, normal function, unknown can be taken out of the scenario. Yes remark, Western-style cowboy boots with high heels, authentic calf leather and hand-sewn. When they first got the wig, they did not notice it, but with the appearance of the sunglasses and the boots, the players all had the same thought. All the mission items that could be taken out of the scenario appeared to be wearable items, and they wondered if that would be related to the plot. Then, there was the second item. It was also a mission item, and it was related to the plot. Item name, its liver item type, plot item quality, normal function, can be embedded into its body. Can be taken out of the scenario. No remark. A pocket-sized organ made from green jade. It is radiating with spiritual energy. Other than the name, the description of this item was identical to its lungs. Obviously, their function was the same as well. It was one of the components of the altar doll at the exit, and it was also a meritorious subject that contributed to the author's word count. Now, there was the third item. Similar to the setting in the music classroom, it was also a piece of paper. The content of the paper could be easily guessed. Mr. Okuda is an excellent student. He is the only student who has completed the entire autopsy process on his own. Perhaps he will really become a doctor. In any case, he will be better than a half-baked teacher like me, who teaches children in the countryside. Combined with the situation in the biology classroom, one could assume that what was written on the paper was the voice of the biology teacher. Unfortunately, other than groans and screams, the biology teacher did not even have any dialogue. Finally, the fourth item was the key to the director's room. Even though the names were different, the director's room was the headmaster's room. After the search, everyone knew that this room was not on the first floor. Therefore, the next exploration had to progress to the second floor. However, right at that moment, Fong Bujue came up with a suggestion. They should explore the two toilets on the first floor first. One could say that he had OCD or was a perfectionist. In any case, leaving these two places that they could enter but had yet to be explored would make him feel uncomfortable. His teammates did not have much to say about that. They were all top players of Thriller Paradise, who did not know about the difficulty of a nightmare scenario. To clear it, one could not be too troublesome, and one could not avoid spaces or scenarios that made one feel uncomfortable or even afraid. Otherwise, it would only lead to more difficult situations. Therefore, the six followed Fong Bujue back to the entrance of the toilet. At this moment, something that was bound to happen sooner or later finally happened. Brother Ju's flashlight suddenly went out without any warning. There was no sound, no flicker, and it went out just like that. Thankfully, Phantom Dawn, who was responsible for bringing up the rear, still had a flashlight in his hand, so the players were not plunged into complete darkness. See, I was right, wasn't I? It ran out of battery just like that. Fong Bujue looked at his flashlight and said smugly, "This awareness of mine, it might not be a miracle, but at least it is a great foresight, right?" "Fine. At least you have foresight," Ruoyu drawled. She mimicked Brother Ju's tone and complimented him. "Hey, my flashlight was switched on at about the same time as yours," Phantom Dawn said. "Since yours has gone out, mine should be going out soon, right?" "That's perfect. You can switch it off now," Fong Bujue replied instantly and turned to tell Xiao Tan, "Xiao Tan, it's your turn to switch on the flashlight." "Roger that," Xiao Tan answered and switched on his own flashlight. Seeing that, Phantom Dawn immediately switched off the flashlight that he was holding. He wanted to preserve the last bit of power in case of emergency. At the same second, Fong Bujue added, "All right, as you can see, since we got the flashlight, we've only been through 2 rooms." In other words, in less than an hour, the flashlight ran out of power. Considering the fact that everyone has switched on their flashlights during this 1 hour, based on my rough estimation, in another 30 minutes, we'll be facing a dead end. "All right, stop trying to scare us. Tell us what's on your mind." And Yueqi knew that Brother Ju's way of speaking was a trap. He would come up with a solution soon. "Huh, that's easy," Fong Bujue said. "We'll split up." "Understood," Ruoyu answered in less than 2 seconds. "Actually, I was thinking about that as well." Then, she used her eyes to point at the entrance of the toilet. "If the 6 of us stay together and explore 2 toilets one after another, it won't be very efficient, but if we split into 2 groups, we can explore 2 toilets at the same time and save half the time." "Yes, that's what I was going to say," Fong Bujue said. "Everyone, what do you think?" When he finished, no one objected. Even Phantom Dawn and Xiao Tan, who were relatively more cowardly, did not say anything. Earlier, when all 6 of their flashlights were still charged, they did not feel anything and they were not that worried about the battery. However, when Brother Ju's flashlight went out, a sense of pressure rushed at the players like a predator chasing after them. They finally knew how long one flashlight could last and how long the other flashlight could last, but they had no idea how long it would take them to escape from this school. It was under this kind of conflict between the known and the unknown that a sense of urgency was born, and it slowly morphed into fear. Fong Bujue was still very relaxed. For him, no matter how bad the situation was, there was always a solution. Therefore, he could still say with a smile, "If no one has any objections, we will split into 2 groups, male and female. We will search one side each." Just like that, the 6 players were split into 2 groups, 3 male and 3 female. For the male group, Xiao Tan was responsible for holding the flashlight, while for the female group, it was decided that Yuachin, who currently had the most power, would be responsible for holding the flashlight. Both parties agreed on a time and a plan to scream for help if anything went wrong. Then, they split up and walked into the two opposite toilets. Chapter 12:20. When Ruo Yu and the other two girls came out of the women's restroom, Brother Ju and the other two boys had been waiting for them at the door for more than a minute. "How was it? Did you find anything?" Feng Buju asked. "We didn't find any items, but there seems to be a hint," and Yuachin replied. Before she could finish, Xiao Ling continued. In the women's restroom, there were 3 graffiti on one of the walls. The first one was a game of tic-tac-toe. The second one was a game of Tower of Hanoi. The third one was a rather strange one. It looked like an irregular pattern made up of many curved lines, and the meaning was unclear. "Did you guys remember the 3 patterns?" Feng Bujuet quickly asked. "We definitely remember the first 2. This time, it was Ruo Yu who answered. But the third one, only Xiao Ling could remember it completely." "Oh, okay." Feng Bujuet nodded. "Since you've remembered it, let's go." What's the situation on your side?" And Yuachin quickly asked when she saw Brother Ju turn around and leave. "Naturally, I have memorized everything that has happened on our side, but to save time, I suggest we talk as we walk." When Feng Bujuet replied, he had already dragged Xiao Tan down the stairs to the second floor. Seeing this, the others didn't say anything and quickly followed. And Yuachin, who was holding another turning-on flashlight, consciously walked to the back of the group and was responsible for bringing up the rear. The situation in the men's restroom is similar to yours. After walking for 2 to 3 meters, Brother Ju began to explain. "We don't have any graffiti here, but behind the door of each of the 3 squatting cubicles, there was a line of words." He paused and continued. The first cubicle's door said, "Be careful of the sink." The second cubicle said, "Pay attention to your feet." The third one said, "Don't run in the corridor." As soon as Brother Ju finished speaking, Xiao Ling said, "Regiment Commander, did you notice that the messages hidden in the 2 toilets might be—" "That's right." Feng Bujuet didn't wait for her to finish and said, "Those messages are important hints about each room." He paused for half a second and continued. "The graffiti in the women's restroom is obviously a hint to the idea of the 9-grid. The 9-grid puzzle appeared in the music room, and the music room puzzle can only be solved by the 3000 nunnery. Since the nunnery is a girl, the clue appeared to be in the women's restroom." "Oh, I get it now." Hearing this, Xiao Tan chimed in. "Based on what you said, the sentence "be careful of the sink" in the men's restroom is a reminder to the sink in the biology room. The puzzle in the biology room will be solved by me, or Yura. Since Yura is a boy, the clue should be in the men's restroom." "Yes." Feng Bujuet agreed. In other words, after we left the second-year class A, the best course of action should have been to go to the restroom. If we had checked the clues in the restroom before we enter the biology and music rooms, we would have been able to solve the puzzle of the seat number more easily, and Xiao Tan would have been able to avoid being injured by the monster. He shrugged, but it's not too late. After all, our team is stronger than the rest. Even though we didn't follow the best course of action, we didn't lose too much. In any case, we just need to be careful from now on. Then, based on this hypothesis, can we make a deduction like this? Ruo Yu was reminded of something. She turned to her brother Ju and said, "In the scenario after this, we need to solve the puzzles of at least 4 areas, and these 4 areas will have to be solved by you, me, Xiao Ling, and Phantom Dawn using a unique skill." "Yes," Feng Bujuet replied. "The possibility of that is high. If that's the case, then we don't have much time left," Phantom Dawn added. Phantom Dawn added in a timely manner. "Even if we include the classroom that we started from, we have only explored 2.5 sections. Already, one of our flashlights has run out of juice. If we continue with our previous progress, there's an 80% chance that the light won't last until we reach the last room." "Don't worry, I've already considered that." Feng Buju added, "From now on, we'll pick up the pace and explore 2 more areas. If things go south, we'll return to the biology classroom and use the alcohol and gauze on the table to make torches. Using that method, We should be able to last for another half an hour. Oh, so that's the plan. When Phantom Dawn heard that, he did feel slightly relieved. The group's conversation reached the bottom of the stairs. Xiao Tan, who was leading the group, did not think much of it. He raised his flashlight and shone it up. He raised his head to look up and prepare to go up the stairs. However, at that moment, wait. Brother Ju, who was standing next to Xiao Tan, suddenly reached out to stop him. He quickly said, "Something's wrong." In this gloomy and oppressive environment, the phrase "something's wrong" itself was also a factor that could make people feel afraid. What? Xiao pulled his foot back and stammered. "Look closer." Feng Bujue turned around and used his eyes to point at the stairs. "There are footprints on the stairs." With the reminder, Xiao Tan noticed that as well. Oh, there really are footprints. Indeed, there were footprints on the wooden stairs, but they had to be shown directly on and looked at from a certain angle to see them clearly. The stairs were about 1-2 meters wide, and on each step there was a footprint. The footprints did not have any pattern on the soles of shoes. There was only an outer outline, and they looked hollow. "Looks like this is the place that Watch Your Step is referring to," Feng Bujue said. "It's not inside the room, but on the stairs." Huh. At this point, he could not help but chuckle. It's impossible to guard against that. Then, how do we solve this puzzle? Phantom Dawn, who followed behind him, asked. "Isn't it obvious? Just follow the footprints on the stairs and follow them up," Feng Bujue said. "Oh, I'll follow." Phantom Dawn wanted to say something, but he realized something was wrong. How come I'm the one who's going up first? Of course. Since this is a puzzle that corresponds to the hint in the male toilet, it has to be solved by a man. Feng Bujue replied. Xiao Tan, who is played by Yuan Shitian, has already completed the autopsy in the biology classroom, so that leaves only you and me. Then, how do you know that you shouldn't be the one to do this? Phantom Dawn asked. When Feng Bujue heard that, he immediately raised one of his legs and dangled the sole of his foot over the footprint on the first step. Then he uttered a word that he thought was perfect in English. "Look." Phantom Dawn took a closer look and narrowed his eyes. "TSK, is it because your feet are big?" "My feet are not big, but they are definitely not as small as those who are less than 1.7 meters tall." Without even thinking about it, Feng Bujue was able to insert personal attacks into a perfectly normal conversation. That was indeed a talent. "Stop wasting time. I'm not even done with puberty yet." Phantom Dawn growled angrily. He took several steps forward and turned on his flashlight again. Fine. I don't have time to waste with you. We're in a hurry." For the sake of the big picture, Phantom Dawn did not argue with Brother Ju, but started to move. Creak, creak. That was the sound made when Phantom Dawn's foot landed on the first step. It sounded like the sound of a wooden plank that could break at any moment. Of course, even though the sound was scary, in reality, the steps did not break. What the? The layout of this footprint is quite sharp. Phantom Dawn was about to take the second step when he realized that the left footprint on the second step was to the right of the right footprint on the first step. Is he trying to climb up the stairs? Even though he complained at this point, there was no telling what would happen if he turned back now. Therefore, he had no choice but to continue down the path that was before him. Therefore, Phantom Dawn started to move up the steps one step at a time. He only took a few steps when Phantom Dawn noticed that the outline of the footprint fit perfectly with the size of his foot. This made him uncomfortable, but also proved that Brother Ju was not wrong. He would be the one to solve the mechanism of the steps. 1 step, 2 steps, Phantom Dawn's balance was not bad. Even though the layout of the footprints was purposely designed to make things difficult for him, he still managed to step on every single footprint steadily. After taking the 12th step, Phantom Dawn came to a junction that connected 2 flights of stairs. There were no footprints in this area, so he stepped on it directly. When both of his feet landed on the flat surface, the 12 steps that he stepped on started to creak strangely. Immediately after, a faintly discernible black smoke rose from the steps, accompanied by that faint smoke. The outline of the footprints on the steps also disappeared. Feng Bujue saw this and mumbled, "After you're done, You can move up the steps freely. After saying that, he lifted his foot and walked up 2 steps to test it. In the end, nothing happened. Even the squeaking sound was gone. Therefore, the group stopped hesitating. 10 seconds later, all 5 of them had reached the turning point of the stairs. Okay, then I'll continue. After everyone was in position, Phantom Dawn moved forward again to step on the second half of the steps. Creak, 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 creak. Similar to the first half, when Phantom Dawn was solving the mechanism, the steps still creaked. Due to his experience, this time he moved faster. After a few steps, his gaze went past the height of the second-floor floor. If he looked straight ahead, he would be able to see the second-floor corridor. And Phantom Dawn did raise his flashlight and lift his head to look. If he did not look, he would have been fine, but once he did, he was so spooked that he almost rolled down the stairs. Hey, perhaps he was too scared, but this time, Phantom Dawn did not scream. He shone the flashlight on what he saw and said in a voice that sounded like he was about to cry. Without turning his head, he said, "Do you still remember the thing that appeared outside the window that we saw in the second-year class, eh?" Fong Bujue, who stood at the back, had noticed the anomaly from Phantom Dawn's shaking back. When he heard that, Brother Ju reacted instantly. "You saw it." Phantom Dawn's had an obvious tremor to it. He is now lying about 1 meter away from the last step, in a crawling position, and looking at me with a wicked smile on his face. "How are you feeling?" Fong Bujue asked. "My legs are weak. I might kneel down or fall down the stairs at any moment." Phantom Dawn did not like to beat around the bush, so he did not beat around the bush. "That won't happen, right? You've already seen it. What is there to be afraid of?" Fong Bujue asked. "That might be the case," Phantom Dawn replied. "But even though we are both seeing, there is a big difference between looking at it from a data perspective and looking at it from this perspective," he explained. "The former is like looking at a map, while the latter is like watching a horror movie." "Then, why don't you look at a horror movie as a matrix?" Fong Bujue drawled. "I'm not as powerful as you." Phantom Dawn sighed helplessly. "Then, think about it this way," Fong Bujue said. "The worst-case scenario is that when you walk past it, it suddenly lunges at you. That's no different from being attacked by a normal monster, right? Then you'll have to fight back, and die. How big of a deal is that? If you put it that way, you've really helped me a lot." The third part of Phantom Dawn's sentence was practically a roar. It was clear that he had reached the state of extreme fear and anger. "Even though I don't want to interrupt your conversation, I think I should remind you." At that moment, Ruoyu, who stood next to Brother Ju, suddenly interjected. "Phantom Dawn, the flashlight you're holding is running low. If you charge forward now, there's a chance that you can use the light to force the monster back or suppress it, but if you continue to stand there and stare at the monster when the flashlight goes off, I'm afraid you won't need to go up. It will..." Before Ruoyu finished, Phantom Dawn yelled and used his fastest speed to step on the footprints on the steps. He climbed up the stairs 1 step at a time. Obviously, Ruoyu's words were effective. This told them that one of the ways to force a person to face their fear was to use a pressure that would increase their fear to force them to act. In just 5 seconds, Phantom Dawn reached the end of the stairs, and as he approached, the monster retreated. With each step that Phantom Dawn took, the expression on the monster's face changed. Finally, the wicked smile turned into a twisted expression of fear. Finally, when Phantom Dawn stepped on the last footprint, the monster screamed under the light of the flashlight. Instantly, it dissolved into a puff of black smoke and disappeared. When Phantom Dawn's feet stepped onto the second-floor corridor, the only thing left on the ground where the monster had crawled was a pair of shoes. Chapter 12:21. You see, as long as you have the courage to face your fear, it is quite easy to defeat it. When Fong Bujue said that, the whole team had reached the second floor. The flashlight in Phantom Dawn's hand had run out of battery. If someone else said that, I would have replied with, "You sure make it sound so easy." Phantom Dawn had calmed down a lot, and when he replied, his tone was much calmer. "But if you put it that way, I cannot refute it, ha." Fong Bujue laughed. "I will take that as a compliment." As he said that, He walked forward to pick up the pair of shoes from the ground. Item name: Cunning Ghost's Boots. Item type: Armor. Quality: Excellent. Defense points: Medium element. None special effect. When you approach a fixed trap, it will release a black fog to warn you. Equip requirement: Male, level 8 or above, size 39 or less, bound after equip. Can be taken out of the scenario. Yes. Remark: A pair of boots left behind by a cunning ghost. It's a piece of equipment. I thought it would be a quest item. After Feng Bujue read the item description, he passed the boots to Phantom Dawn. You were the one who solved the trap here, so you should take the reward. Phantom Dawn did not stand on ceremony with the man. He accepted the boots first. The stats are nothing special. Phantom Dawn looked at the equipment and said, but it is not that useless. Then he tied the two boots together with his shoelaces and tossed them over his shoulder. In any case, I will gladly accept them. After all, he was a professional player under order, so he was able to estimate the value of a piece of equipment pretty accurately. That was why he knew that this kind of equipment belonged to the category of equipment that could be sold at a reasonable price in the auction house. Of course, he did not mind that because he did not need to deal with the loot. The studio had people who were responsible for distributing the equipment and skills that could be traded. Okay, you don't look like you need a rest. Let's not delay any longer. Let's continue our journey. 2 seconds later, Feng Bujue turned around and said to everyone. He then waved at Xiao Tan and asked him to lead the way. However, Xiao Tan suggested, Brother Ju, I think you should lead the way. I'll give you the flashlight. Feng Bujue pondered for a second and said, all right, I'll do it. Hey, seeing this, Phantom Dawn was shocked. How come when he made his request, you became so easy to negotiate with? Previously, when I raised objections to your command, you ridiculed me in all sorts of ways. Because he's injured. Feng Bujue replied in a matter-of-fact tone without even thinking. If you had been slapped by the monster earlier, I would have definitely taken care of your situation. That was a perfectly reasonable reason. There was nothing to nitpick about. Fine. You're always right. Phantom Dawn narrowed his eyes and grumbled, but he did not continue. Brother Ju took the flashlight from Xiao Tan and walked to the front of the group. As he walked, he said, other than that, if you let me walk at the front, I'll be able to block most of the shock you scenarios, right? It'll be good for your terror points rating. That's enough. Other than you, the rest of us have been scared many times already, and Yuechin said. As long as we can clear this scenario, I don't care about the rating anymore. You're right. Ruoyu nodded. This scenario is quite scary, and there are too many scary scenarios. Our rating is basically hopeless. At this point, she turned to Brother Ju and changed the topic. But even if we do not care about the terror points, I support you walking at the front because your efficiency in this kind of scenario is much higher than ours. Normally, we will be affected by fear, but you will not be affected by it. In this kind of situation where we need to race against time, you're the most suitable to lead the way. While they were talking, Brother Ju did not stop moving, and the rest followed closely behind him. The layout of the second floor was different from the first floor. The space here was small, and after they came up the stairs, they could see the end of the corridor. There were only 2 rooms here. Feng Bujue did not hurry to open the door. He walked to the end of the corridor and inspected a window there. Similar to the few windows in the biology classroom on the first floor, the window here was facing outside the school. Since they were on the second floor, they could see further. Brother Ju stood before the window and looked out for several seconds before he suddenly said, Guys, if I'm not mistaken, that's Tori. Before he finished, Xiao Ling and Xiao Tan both came over. Other than the buff from the game, these two had excellent eyesight in real life as well. When it came to this kind of work that required eyesight, the two of them would usually volunteer to help. That's right. Using the clear moonlight, Xiao Tan soon confirmed it. It's on the mountain path over there. I see it too. It's red, so it has to be Tori, Xiao Ling added. In other words, after passing through the small forest and following the mountain path, we'll run into a shrine soon, right? Feng Bujue asked. You mean? Phantom Dawn caught on to something in his words. The shrine that I saw on the news earlier, the Sanskrit shrine, and Yuetchin reminded him. All right, the Sanskrit shrine, Phantom Dawn said. You mean to say that the ceremony is not far from this school, so it might be related to the series of supernatural incidents that have happened here. That I don't know. Currently, we don't have enough information. Feng Bujue turned around and signaled for the others to follow him. Based on what I know, normally, the Sanskrit shrine is a kind of folk activity that has been passed down since the Edo period. It is usually held at the Asakusa area in Tokyo. Basically, it's something like carrying a sedan chair around the streets. But this small town where Chongju Elementary is located, or rather, their village, I have no idea what the Sanskrit shrine is for. When he said that, Feng Bujue had already reached the door to the director's office on the second floor. Just opposite the door was the storeroom, where the fire had broken out. Let me try this door first. Brother Ju stood there and thought for 2 seconds before turning to the door of the storeroom. This door is sealed by a dark force. Okay. After getting the hint that he had expected, Feng Bujue looked at his teammates and shrugged. Then he took out the key to the director's office and opened the door to the headmaster's office. The door of this room was different from all the previous doors. It was not the kind of horizontal sliding door, but an ordinary flat door. Therefore, Feng Bujue did not pull it open horizontally, but pushed the door inward. Ugh! The moment the door was pushed open, a low groan came from the room behind the door. Along with the groan, there was a strong smell of alcohol. Huh! When Feng Bujue smelled the smell, he chuckled. This hint is rather obvious. As he walked through the door, he said, "You're trying to tell us that the headmaster is a drunkard who messes things up because of alcohol, right?" The period after the door was opened was the period where the number of scares increased. Even though Brother Ju had a point, the others did not seem like they were going to follow him. They were all tensed up, ready for some kind of emergency. About 10 seconds later, all 6 players walked into the headmaster's office. If the biology classroom on the first floor had a small activity space, then this room had a small space. It was about 30 square meters in size. There was an office table, 3 solid wooden chairs, and a large bookshelf. The table and bookshelf were naturally for the headmaster's office. As for the chairs, it was obvious that one was for the headmaster himself, and the other 2 were for visiting parents. Other than that, there was a window in this headmaster's office. Once Feng Bujue entered the room, he rushed to the window. He wanted to know what he could see through the window. Then he saw the school field, and oh, this is strange. Feng Bujue stood at the window for a few seconds before he said that. What's wrong? Phantom Dawn was closest to him, so he also leaned over to take a look. You saw. Before he could finish, he saw what Brother Ju was looking at, and he yelped in shock. What's going on? What did you see? The rest of the team was spooked by him, and they all turned around to ask. There's someone outside. Phantom Dawn stammered. Hearing that, everyone gathered around the window and looked out. At this moment, a figure was standing on the school's spacious field. With the help of the moonlight, they could see that it was a man about 30. He was wearing a white shirt, black trousers, and a pair of glasses. From the looks of it, he looked like a normal office worker. He was slightly plump, looked average, and had a normal hairstyle. Actually, if he was just standing there, he would not have scared Phantom Dawn. But the problem was he was lifting his head to look at the window of the headmaster's office, and he was using his eyes to look directly at the players. That was rather creepy. Brother Ju, what should we do? Xiao Tan asked for Feng Bujue's opinion. Time is of the essence. You should search the room first. I'll try to communicate with him. When Feng Bujue replied, he raised his right hand and waved at the man on the field. Be careful. After Ruo Yu heard Feng Bujue's order, she did not waste a second. She turned on her flashlight and ran toward the office table. The others hesitated for a moment before leaving the window as well. Therefore, the investigation of the headmaster's office began. This time, the players were in a race against time. They moved quickly, and they only used 4 minutes to finish everything. The final result was as follows. 1. The phone on the office table was not connected. It looked like a decoration. 2. The office table had 3 drawers, 1 large and 2 small. Only the small drawer on the left could be opened. The large drawer in the middle and the small drawer on the right both indicated that they needed a key. Third, there was a black and white photo in the drawer that could be opened. There was no description of the item in the photo, and there were no dates or words on the photo. The photo was of a little boy about 7 or 8 years old who didn't look cute at all. Fourth, there was a large pile of documents and information in the bookcase, but 99% of the contents were not visible. In other words, they were irrelevant information that had been blurred by the system. However, there was an extra large group photo, which was still relatively clear. On the back of the group photo, there was a line of words. Show of 46th year, first year class A. For minutes later, Fong Bujua voluntarily turned around to tell his teammates, "Okay, it looks like we're almost there." "Yeah, there's not much to search in this room," Ruoyu replied. Then, she asked, "How's it going on your side?" "No reaction," Fong Bujua replied. "Be more specific," Ruoyu said again. "More specific." Fong Bujua continued. "I waved at him, waved my flashlight, made the peace sign in Star Trek, made a face, and gave him the middle finger. Basically, I did everything I could. If the system did not forbid me to, I would have taken off my pants in front of the window." He paused for 2 seconds. But that guy just stood there with an unchanged expression and continued to stare at me. He did not react at all. Okay, Ruoyu realized that she should not have asked. To make a long story short, since their conversation with the mysterious man outside the window was fruitless, the players decided to leave him alone for the time being. After they discussed the results of their search, they entered the phase of solving the mystery. So, the starting point is these 2 photos. Fong Bujua looked at the 2 pictures on the table and read aloud. "This show of 46th year grade 1 class is naturally the show of 47th year grade 2 class. In other words, the people in this picture, including the teacher and the students, can be called show of 46th year grade 2 class. You mean?" Xiao Ling followed Brother Ju's train of thought and said, "The hidden mission we received, investigate the whereabouts of all the students in Year 2 class, is not only to investigate the whereabouts of the 9 students, but also to find out the fate of everyone in this photo." "Yes, that's right," Fong Bujua continued. "Fortunately, now we know the whereabouts of 3 of them." He pointed at one of the children in the photo. "This is Eiji Noguchi. He died before the locker in the classroom on the 14th of May, year 47. He paused for a second, and his finger moved slightly. "This is the female ghost that we met in the music room. She was probably the music teacher. Even though we don't know the exact time of death, there is no doubt that she died inside the locker in the classroom." "How did you recognize her even though her body has turned into a skeleton?" Phantom Dawn asked. "Wasn't she hanging upside down when the door was opened?" Fong Bujue replied calmly. "You didn't get a good look, but I saw her face clearly from a close distance." That was a convincing answer. "Now let's talk about the third one," Fong Bujue said as he pointed at another person in the photo. "This one in the white coat, if I'm not mistaken, is the spaghetti in the biology classroom." Chapter 12:22. Since he is wearing a white coat, he must be the biology teacher, right? Phantom Dawn asked. "Huh." Fong Bujua chuckled and replied, "What you said is called prejudice. It cannot be counted as proof." He paused for half a second before adding, "The real proof that I can confirm that he is the thing in the biology classroom is the birthmark on the back of his hand." When he said this, his teammates instinctively looked at the photo. Since the photo was large, they could see the details clearly. There was indeed a patch of skin with a different color on the back of the hand of the man in the white coat. "You sure are something," Phantom Dawn commented. At the entrance of the music classroom, facing the hanging female ghost, you were able to remember her face so clearly. In the biology classroom, when you were wrestling with the ghost's arm, you were able to notice the birthmark on the back of your hand. Yes, a normal person would not notice that kind of detail at a time like that. Fong Buju added. "You're trying to say that you're not normal, aren't you?" Phantom Dawn mocked. "Humph, don't mind the details." Brother Ju smiled and pointed at the picture. "Let's focus back on the picture." He moved his finger away from the picture and said, "In this picture, there are 13 people. There are 9 children and 4 adults. Now we have confirmed that there are 2 adults and 1 child. Regarding the rest of the people, how about we make a logical guess? It shouldn't be that hard to guess who the 2 adults are, right? Rual, you said. From how I see it, the younger man has a high chance of being the homeroom teacher of Year 2 Class A, and a remaining fat uncle has to be the headmaster of this school. Yes, I agree, and Yuachin agreed. Based on their identities, it is reasonable for the headmaster and homeroom teacher to appear in the picture. But is it possible that the homeroom teacher of this class is a biology teacher or a music teacher? Phantom Dawn suggested. You're right. Feng Bujue continued. Even though in our country, it is natural for the main subject teacher to be the head teacher. This scenario is set in Japan during the Showa era, so we cannot take that kind of thinking for granted. Furthermore, for a rural primary school like this, the teaching power is definitely weaker, so it is possible for any subject to be the head teacher. He pointed at the younger man in the photo. But the next second, he changed the topic. To be honest, whether this person is our homeroom teacher or not, it doesn't make any difference to us. Since he was in the group photo, it meant that he was considered a member of this class. Judging from the plot, we might see him in one of the scenes later. Besides, there was a high chance that he was already dead. So, it didn't matter if he was a math teacher or a physical education teacher. Even if he was a math teacher or a physical education teacher, it didn't matter to us. What we need to focus on is his ending, or rather his ending. Then, based on what you said, Phantom Dawn followed Brother Bujue's line of thought and turned to the oldest man in the picture. Whether this man is the headmaster or not, we don't need to care too much about it, right? He is the headmaster. At that moment, Xiao Tan suddenly interjected and confirmed in a tone that was as certain as it could be. Oh, how can you be so sure? Feng Buja turned to look at Xiao Tan and asked with interest. Isn't that obvious? Xiao Tan lowered his head to look at the picture and replied, Look, when the picture was taken, he was fixing his tie, wasn't he? You mean? With his reminder, Xiao Ling stared at the picture for 2 seconds before realization dawned on her. He is left-handed? That's right, Xiao Tan said. From the position he is standing, it is more convenient for him to use his right hand to fix his tie, right? But he used his left hand, so this is a matter of habit. He paused and turned to look at the phone on the table. Then, let's look at the layout of this office. The table is placed on the right side of the wall, and the phone is placed on the left side of the table. The light switch in the room, even though it cannot be switched on now, it is placed on the left side of the door. In addition, the arrangement of the documents on the bookcase and the wear and tear of the sliding rail under the bookcase's glass door, the horizontal double-layered glass door, all show that the person who uses this chairman's office, Mr. Headmaster, is a left-handed person. Wow! After hearing that, Phantom Dawn widened his eyes and gasped in shock. Looks like the members of Underworld Frontline are all great detectives. Their observation skills are amazing, aren't they? It's not that bad. Xiao Tan smiled sheepishly. This level of deduction was taught to me by Brother Ju when I was in primary school. Then, he pointed at the chair behind the table. By the way, from the wear and tear on the chair, it is clear that the person sitting on it is a left-handed fatty. Not bad, Feng Bujua said. Then, have you checked the keyholes of the drawers? Yes. Xiao Tan nodded. I have. There are many scratches. What can the scratches prove? Phantom Dawn asked curiously. It means that the person's hands are shaking, Feng Bujue replied. Parkinson's? Phantom Dawn asked. It's the drunkard. Xiao Ling corrected him and gave the slow Phantom Dawn a condescending side eye. Oh, yes, there was a hint when we opened the door. Phantom Dawn was embarrassed. He was too good at deduction. Okay, let's stop discussing the identity of the adults for now. Feng Bujue changed the topic at the right time. Let's look at the 9 children. As he spoke, he looked around at his teammates. There are 6 boys and 3 girls. Thankfully, the 3 girls are already here, so the problem is focused on the 6 boys, or rather, the 5 boys other than Noguchi Eiji. The only thing that could be confirmed is, of the 5, 3 of them are Yamada, Takeda, and Sasuke, Phantom Dawn said. And the other 2, One is the class monitor, Watanabe, and the other is Suzuki. He paused. The question is, how do we differentiate these five? By the way, Brother Jew, Shouten was reminded of something. Is there any more specific information on that old newspaper? Like a description of their appearance? If there is, I would have analyzed their identity a long time ago. Fong Bujue replied. Obviously, the system purposely did not leave any personal information on the newspaper, but as he spoke, his eyes moved to the other picture on the table. The identity of this boy is rather obvious. He is Suzuki, right? Wakama was the first to answer. From what we know so far, the plot of the previous fire is roughly as follows. Due to the principal's heavy drinking, he got drunk in the middle of the day, so he didn't even notice that the opposite warehouse was on fire, which led to Suzuki Takayuki being burned alive. After the incident, the headmaster was condemned by his conscience or haunted by the spirits, and in the end, he hanged himself at home. You have a point. Xiaoling nodded. Be it the condemnation of his conscience or the haunting of the spirits, it is not strange for this picture to appear in his drawer. The difference is, in the former case, it was the headmaster who placed the picture there, but in the latter case, it was a ghost. Glug, glug, glug. Just as Xiaoling was about to say the word ghost, suddenly, the phone on the table rang. It had to be said that this plot was filled with malice. First, the ringtone was exceptionally loud. It was much louder than a normal conversation between players. Second, all the players were gathered around the table, and their attention was on the two pictures on the table. They did not have any mental defenses. Third, after the initial shock, the fact that this phone is not connected to a phone line would naturally surface in the players' minds, and it would create a deeper sense of fear. In summary, even though the plot didn't add any visual impact, under the influence of multiple factors, the sudden ringing of the bell still scared the surrounding players quite a bit. Tisk, even in Yuachin's face, was red. She used her hand to press on her rising and falling chest and grumbled, "This sure is hard to guard against. What the F*** CK?" Phantom Dawn, who had taken several steps back from the scare, sat down on the chair next to the table. Just now, I felt like my heart stopped for several seconds. In those few seconds, I forgot about the pain from my wound, Xiaotan added. Glug, glug, glug. Glug, glug, glug. While they were talking, the phone did not stop ringing. Then, Fong Buja, who stood beside the table and was not spooked, looked left and right. After confirming that none of his teammates had disconnected, he pressed the speakerphone button on the phone. Moshi Moshi. After Brother Ju pressed the button, he dragged his voice and used a lazy drawl to speak Japanese. Damn it. Quick, answer the phone. A man's scream came from the other end. Based on the speed and voice, it should be a young man. Mr. Headmaster, have you been drinking in the morning again? Wake up. The warehouse opposite the chairman's office is on fire. I know you have a secret wine cellar. If the fire reaches that place. The screaming on the phone stopped abruptly. There was no busy tone, and there was no disconnect. It was cut off just like that. If I'm not mistaken, after several seconds, Fong Bujue turned to Ruo Yu and said, "It was your analysis that triggered this scenario. In other words, we can confirm Suzuki's appearance now," Ruo Yu said. Yes. Fong Bujue nodded and said, "Furthermore, the phone call earlier has already given us the next clue. A secret wine cellar, huh?" Even Phantom Dawn understood the key words in that sentence. But we searched very carefully, but there was no entrance to the wine cellar. Yes, I've moved everything inside the bookcase, and Yuechin said. I've checked the table as well. There is nothing that looks like a switch, Xiaotan added. Fong Bujue sighed. So, the only way left is to knock down the walls and floor inch by inch? There's no need for that. At that moment, Xiaoling suddenly interjected. I'll find the entrance soon. After saying that, she turned on her flashlight and shone it on the floor with a very focused expression. Seeing that, everyone cooperated with her and kept quiet. They did not disturb her. Found it. Xiaoling was a woman of her word. In just 20 seconds, she used her flashlight to point at a piece of floor in the corner of the room. It's here. As she spoke, she walked to the area and stomped twice on the floor with moderate force. Dong, dong. The sound that came back showed that the floor was hollow. The moment she stomped on the floor, there was a click. The second small drawer of the 3 drawers on the inside of the table clicked. It sounded like it had been unlocked. Xiao Tan, who was closer to the table, took out the 3 items from the drawer: a piece of paper, a calculator, and a remote control. This is a puzzle, right? Phantom Dawn, who was not familiar with puzzles, mumbled under his breath when he saw the items that did not have any description. All right, there's no need for you to solve them. Feng Bujue smiled at him. Let Laughing Soul solve the puzzle here. Xiao Ling had returned to the table. She first looked at the piece of paper. There was a string of numbers written on it. They were 231568, 6, 3, 8, 5, 11, 9, 6, 4, and 616,512. Then there was the calculator. Even though it had not been opened, based on visual inspection, it was a standard calculator that could display 12 digits. Finally, there was the remote control. In addition to the red and green buttons, there were also 10 number keys and a clear button. The remote control must be used to open the secret wine cellar. After Xiao Ling confirmed everything, she said, but you need to enter an 8-digit password. Doesn't the number on the paper add up to 8? Phantom Dawn asked immediately when he heard that. But 2 of them are 11. Feng Bujue poured a bucket of cold water on him before anyone else could. Phantom Dawn was shocked. Fine. I won't say anything else. Actually, it's very simple. On the other hand, Xiao Ling thought about it for a few seconds and said with a smile, for a puzzle of this level, even without the calculator, I can solve it with my mind. Oh, I get it now. When Xiao Tan heard that, it dawned on him. You need to use the calculator to calculate these 10 numbers to get an 8-digit number, right? Chapter 1223. There's no need for that. Xiao Ling rejected Xiao Tan's analysis without thinking. Xiao Tan was surprised by that as well. Of course. Feng Bujue smiled. As an alcoholic who is desperate to open the wine cellar, he will not use a method that is too complicated. That's right, Xiao Ling added. Well, we can understand that once we analyze the headmaster's mentality. If possible, he would have written down the 8-digit password on a piece of paper. That would have been the most convenient. As she spoke, she pointed at the remote control. Look, he has placed the remote control and the 2 items that are needed to unlock the cellar. This means that he knows that when he is addicted, he will not have time to do anything complicated. His mind will only be filled with the desire to open the cellar as soon as possible. Then, why didn't he set up a simpler password and memorize it in his mind, or just write down the 8-digit password on a piece of paper? Phantom Dawn added, in that case, even if he is drunk, he will be able to open the wine cellar. You are not wrong, but while he is doing this for himself, he has to consider the issue of safety. Xiao Ling replied. After all, he is a primary school headmaster. If the fact that he is hiding wine in the headmaster's office is exposed, he will lose his job. Otherwise, he would not have built such a secret cellar and installed an entrance with a remote control. Oh, Phantom Dawn understood. Xiao Tan added, so he came up with this convenient and safe method. He placed all the items needed to open the cellar inside the drawer and added some kind of simple encryption to it. That way, even if someone discovers the items inside the drawer, they will not be able to unlock the password in a short amount of time. Or rather, under normal circumstances, the person who discovered these 3 items would not have considered the possibility of unlocking, right? Feng Bujue added with a smile. We use the perspective of a modern person, a player, to think about this problem, and that is why we came up with the use of these 3 items. But what about looking at it from the perspective of the characters in this scenario? He paused before continuing. You have to understand that this scenario is set in the 1970s. At that time, it was only a decade or so before the advent of wireless remote control for civilian use. It was not until the 1980s that the infrared remote control that we are familiar with started to become popular. So, wireless remote control was obviously still a rare thing for people at that time. In a primary school in the Japanese countryside, how many people could recognize the remote control? Taking a step back, even if someone knew that this was the remote control, so what? This person would need to know at least two other things before he would consider the decryption layer. At this point, Brother Ju raised two fingers. First, he needs to know that the headmaster has a secret wine cellar. Only then will he be able to figure out what the remote control is used to control. Second, he needs to know how the remote control works and the exact location of the entrance to the wine cellar. Because the remote control in that era used ultrasonic technology, not infrared, the entrance to the wine cellar did not have an obvious infrared receiver. If the user does not know where the entrance is, even if they decipher the password, they will not be able to open the wine cellar. By the way, I wanted to ask earlier. Xiao Tan heard this and turned to look at Xiao Ling. How did you find the entrance? I found it based on the texture of the floor, Xiao Ling replied. The floor. Xiao Tan mumbled as he lowered his head to look. Indeed, the wooden floor used in the headmaster's office was better than any other area that they had been to before. Not only was the floor thick and compact, but the wooden boards were also patterned. Oh, I understand now. 2 seconds later, and Yueqin suddenly realized. One of the 3 hints in the female toilet is used here. Yes. Xiao Ling nodded. The seemingly random graffiti on the wall of the female toilet matches the texture of the floor at the entrance to the wine cellar. When I was exploring this room earlier, I vaguely felt that the texture of the floor here was familiar. When I heard the commander say that we had to knock on the wall and floor inch by inch to find the entrance, I realized where the problem was. Then the problem is back. 2 seconds later, Xiao Tan said to Xiao Ling, "What is the 8-digit password that is not complicated?" 42561047. Xiao Ling said the answer in the next second. Huh. This time, the other 5 people, including Feng Bujue, all had the same reaction. How did you solve it? Brother Ju was the first to ask. It's very easy. Multiply 231568 by 616,512, and you get a 12-digit number, which is 142764450,816, Xiao Ling answered. And the 8 digits in the middle refer to the 8 positions of the 12-digit number. The 6th digit is 4, the 3rd digit is 2, the 8th digit is 5, the 5th digit is 6, the 11th digit is 1, the 9th digit is 0, the 6th digit is 4, and the last digit is 7. Other than the 6th digit, which is repeated once for the 7 positions, there is no repetition of the digits. In other words, there are no 2 positions that refer to the same number. This matches the logic of the password. When she finished, the room was silent. Hey. About 5 seconds later, Phantom Dawn recovered. This big sister over there. He paused for half a second and asked with confusion. You haven't even opened the calculator, so how did you manage to multiply 2 6-digit numbers? Mental calculation, Xiao Ling replied with 2 words. These 2 words caused Phantom Dawn to be silent for another 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, he studied the man's expression and realized that he was not joking. Therefore, 5 seconds later, he replied with these 3 words, Fine, UNO, by the way. After Phantom Dawn said that, Xiao Ling picked up the calculator and waved it around. This calculator has no battery. When I checked it earlier, I realized that it could not be opened. Then, she tossed the calculator on the table. Then I understood this is not a necessary tool to decrypt the password, but a tool to give us hints. So, what is a dead calculator supposed to give us? Think about it, and you'll understand. It's a single digit. This is a calculator that can display at most 12 digits. So the message it is giving us cannot be more obvious. Taking into account the fact that the headmaster will not use overly complicated encryption and the various numbers on the paper, it is easy to come to this conclusion. At that moment, Phantom Dawn did not feel like speaking anymore. An inexplicable sense of frustration continued to expand in his heart, gradually suppressing his fear and causing his mind to be in turmoil. Before coming up with this script, Ma Junxiao felt that he was a talent. While his peers were still studying hard in high school, preparing for the college entrance examination, he was already earning a salary that others could never earn even if they graduated with a bachelor's degree. However, The scenario with these people from Underworld Frontline had shattered the sense of superiority that Phantom Dawn had built up after he started working. He could not help but think a question that every professional gamer, esports player, or anyone who supported themselves by playing games had thought about and should have thought about. That was, other than playing games, what else could he do? Or rather, what else could he do? There was a limit to how long a game could stay popular. No matter how high the quality of the game was, it could not stay popular forever. Eventually, there would be games that were more advanced and more up-to-date to replace it. However, some games would still be called classics 10 or 20 years after their release, and some would fade out of the public sight after 1 or 2 years. Any professional gamer's career was limited. No matter how much glory he had won and how many fans he had, he would eventually retire. This was because people would age, and people aged faster than games, and they were easier to replace. However, people were not games. Games that were no longer popular could be taken down, but players who could no longer earn money from games could not be buried, right? Their lives were still long, and they still had a long way to go. After Ma Junxiao entered the gaming industry, he had naturally been influenced by similar things. He realized that many superstar players who were like legends in the hearts of the players had a normal life after they faded out of the public eye. In fact, one could even call it a sad life. Of course, there were those who had a good life, like those who used the money they earned when they were young to start their own business, or those who found a more stable behind-the-scenes job in the gaming industry. But the proportion of these people was not high. Phantom Dawn was a sensible child. After seeing and hearing enough, he understood that one could play games forever, but it would be difficult to support oneself for the rest of one's life. That was not a problem of hard work or talent. It was something that was physically impossible. There were many who gave up their studies to enter the gaming industry at a young age like him. Indeed, before the age of 30, even if they were just a blue-collar gamer, they could earn quite a decent income. But what would happen after 30? What should they do? Most of them had not considered that, or rather, they did not dare to think about it. If they could stay in the gaming industry, that would be the best, but there were conditions to stay. Money, skill, ability, at least one of them had to be there. Just knowing how to play games was useless. Changing careers, that would be difficult. Even if some of them became professional gamers after they finished university, to enter a completely unfamiliar field after 10 years of absence, one could imagine how difficult it would be to start from the bottom. Of course, this group of people was not that bad. There were many who did not even finish high school like Phantom Dawn, and the situation of their career change was even more worrying. After all that was said and done, it was necessary to be objective. These kinds of considerations and thoughts were not things that a person of Phantom Dawn's age should have needed to consider. With his qualifications, he could at least stay at the top of the gaming industry for another 10 years, or even longer. However, Phantom Dawn had been thinking about this for more than a day or two. It was not that he had been provoked by the people from Underworld Frontline that day, even though he had been greatly provoked that day. Actually, he had been thinking about many things related to the future before this, and the future that he was thinking about was not limited to these practical problems. There were many strange thoughts, including doubts about this world, that would appear in his mind involuntarily. The reason was that Ma Junxiao was not a normal person. He was a candidate. His will, talent, and potential, they were all different from others. It was just that the current him had yet to realize this. 2 minutes later, the door to the wine cellar was open. Xiaoling's prediction was correct. Feng Bujue took the flashlight and led the way into the underground space. I say, when Brother Ju walked down the stairs, he glanced at the structure of the door and said, "This Mr. Headmaster of Zhongjiu Primary School is most likely an engineering student." When he said that, he had already walked down the stairs that were not that long. He stepped into a very small space below the headmaster's office. The mechanism at the entrance to this wine cellar and the accompanying remote control are obviously his own work. Perhaps he dug out the whole wine cellar himself. He stood at the bottom for a few seconds and suddenly said, "Wait a minute, is it possible that the headmaster was directly involved in the construction of this primary school?" Ruoyu, who followed Brother Ju into the wine cellar, answered quickly. In a small town like this, It is normal for the project to be handed over to the village's company or someone related to the project. She muttered, "If this principal is really an engineering student, your speculation is indeed possible." As they spoke, the two of them stood still in the wine cellar. The space was rather narrow, like a compressed subway car. In terms of height, Brother Jew would not be able to straighten his back even if he stood inside it. In terms of width, it was not even possible for two people to stand side by side. To switch places, they would have to turn their body sideways. As for the length, at a glance, the wall was 5 meters away. When they were observing from above, Brother Jew said that there was no need for all 6 of them to go down together. So, only he and Ruoyu came down, while the others stayed in the headmaster's office to wait. "I think this speculation is plausible," Feng Bujue said as he walked forward. "There is a 90% chance that this space was set aside in advance when the building was completed. If he was one of the people in charge of the project, it would be easy for him to find an excuse to create a secret room here. Speaking of which, this place is really small. The two of us can't even turn around." Well, you said, "Why don't I go up first?" The moment she asked this question, only a bang sound could be heard. The entrance to the wine cellar behind them suddenly closed. Chapter 12:24. "Hey, are you guys okay?" 2 seconds after the entrance closed, Xiao Tan's voice came through the floorboards. "So far, we're fine." Feng Bujue was quick to answer. Actually, for the two who were in the wine cellar, the closing of the entrance did not bring much fear to them because the principal's office above them was similar to the one below. They were both lit up by flashlights. Therefore, even if the shutter was closed, from a visual point of view, they did not feel that the room had darkened that much. However, the sound of the bang was rather scary. Of course, that was not enough to scare Feng Bujue. "Brother Jew." The next second, Xiao Tan yelled again. "The door is closed on its own." I thought so," Feng Bujue replied weakly. That was obvious. After all, the door could not have been closed by Xiao Tan's group. The remote control seems to have lost its function. Several seconds later, Xiao Ling's voice rang out. She had tried to use the remote control to open the entrance again, and she had failed. Phantom Dawn, who squatted down to inspect the door, added, "If you touch this door with your hand, you'll get the hint that it is sealed by a dark force." Everyone understood the meaning of this hint. The method to open the entrance had changed. "Humph, looks like we'll have to split up from here onwards." Feng Bujue smiled and told his teammates through the floorboards, "In any case, go and look around to see if there are any flags that can be triggered." Speaking of which, the first thing that came to Xiao Tan's mind was the mysterious man on the field. Thus, the 4 of them quickly walked to the window and looked out again. But, Brother Jew, in less than 10 seconds, Xiao Tan ran back to the top of the entrance and yelled down the stairs, "The man has disappeared." Almost at the same time as he shouted these words, suddenly, from the darkness outside the headmaster's office, came a whoosh sound. That. Brother Jew naturally heard the sound as well. Was it the sound of the door being pulled open? Xiao Tan froze for a second before replying. "I think so." There was no doubt that the source of the noise was not on the second floor. There were only 2 rooms on the second floor, the principal's office and the warehouse opposite it. Both of them had flat doors. Therefore, the noise must have come from downstairs. "What should we do? Should we go down and take a look?" And Yuachin asked after a short silence. Of course, this is obviously the main storyline. Feng Bujue, who was under the floor, continued. "Anyway, the 4 of you have already completed the puzzle that can only be solved by specific characters. It doesn't matter if you get a bento, so you can go without worry." "Then what are you going to do?" Xiao Tan asked again. "Do you want to leave someone here to help you?" "Absolutely not." Feng Bujue replied firmly. "Leaving someone here to wait for us is like leaving a flashlight here for nothing. How is that possible?" He paused for a moment, then said, "You should hurry up and explore. We'll be fine. When you're done with the plot outside, maybe we'll be able to get out." He was right. At that moment, both teams had 2 flashlights. In the wine cellar, Feng Bujue was holding Xiao Tan's flashlight, and Ruoyu was holding hers. Outside, Xiao Ling and Yueqin were holding their own flashlights. Although the power of the 4 flashlights was different, they were all mostly depleted. If there were no accidents, the 4 flashlights would go out one by one in the next 10 minutes. Okay, we understand. A few seconds later, Xiao Tan and the others came to a consensus. Then, Brother Ju, you guys be careful. We'll go first. Let's go. Don't dawdle, Brother Ju replied. There was no sense of crisis in his tone. Instead, there was a hint of impatience in his tone. With that, the 4 people outside felt relieved. They immediately left the principal's office and headed to the first floor. And just like that, Feng Bujue and Li Ruyu were trapped inside that narrow secret wine cellar. Are you sure this is okay? About 10 seconds later, Ruo Yu confirmed with her hearing that everyone had left. You should have noticed, since the moment the entrance was sealed, this place, I know. Feng Bujue interrupted her. But I don't think it's necessary to let them know. He paused for half a second before continuing. Even if I tell them that the air in the wine cellar is almost as strong as the gaseous alcohol, they can't do anything about it. It's better not to tell them. Otherwise, it'll only add to their stress. Obviously, both of them had noticed that the situation after the entrance was sealed was not a change in light, but a change in air. The former would at most make people feel a little scared, but the latter was a physiological effect. So, what should we do now? Ruo Yu asked. Are we just going to wait for the entrance to open by itself? It's rare that we have such an opportunity. Why don't we flirt while we're still drunk? At that moment, Feng Bujue turned his head and shone the flashlight on his face from top to bottom. He revealed, how should he describe it? A perverted smile seemed to be more appropriate. Okay, you can start. Unexpectedly, Ruo Yu gave an affirmative answer. However, her expression was dead fish eyes and a stoic face. Her tone was sarcastic. No problem, Feng Bujue chuckled again. Then, he used the tone of a ruffian in a TV series who flirted with an innocent woman on the street and said, Hey beautiful, are you alone? Yeah, Ruo Yu replied. Feng Bujue continued. Do you want to find a place where there's no one around to talk about life? Are you talking about what we're doing right now? Ruo Yu continued. Brother Ju couldn't take it anymore. Whenever he was in danger, he would instinctively use a method to deal with it, to lower his bottom line. About that. Why don't we do something dirty? Spit in your mouth? Ruo Yu continued to use her cold tone and sharp reaction to attack Brother Ju's immoral behavior. Finally, Brother Ju sighed. Okay, I won't joke with you anymore. When he said this, he finally recovered his serious, relatively speaking, attitude. Let's continue moving forward. After that, he didn't wait for Ruo Yu's response. He turned around and continued moving forward. In a few steps, he reached the wall on the other side. There's a path over there? Ruo Yu asked as she followed. There's no path, but there's an obvious puzzle. Brother Ju said as he turned slightly to the side, revealing a row of wine racks in front of him. The wine racks had 3 levels, and each level had 5 wooden troughs. At this moment, there were 5 bottles of wine in the 15 troughs. The 2 bottles in the first row were on the leftmost side. The 1 bottle in the second row was on the 4th shelf, and the 2 bottles in the 3rd row were on the 1st and 5th shelves. Ruo Yu reacted quickly. It's related to the graffiti of the Tower of Hanner hint in the women's washroom, right? It should be, Feng Bujue replied. But you can solve this puzzle as well, Ruo Yu continued. Could it be that Momo is a girl in the setting? How can that be? Then there should only be 2 hints in the men's washroom, Feng Bujue replied. In my opinion, it's because the hint itself is the same no matter who solves it. He paused for a second and said, the Enneagram hint of TC_Taco_TOE and the hint of watch your step. Aren't they all solved by me? So, Ruo Yu motioned for him to continue. So, a hint is a hint. It doesn't matter who discovers the connection. Feng Bujue said, the point is there should be some kind of problem that can only be solved by a specific character in the place indicated by the hint. He immediately gave an example. For example, where the hint of TC_Taco_TOE is used, it needs a person who can play the piano. Where the hint of watch your step is used, it needs a person who can dissect. And where the hint of watch your step is used, it needs a person who is 6 meters tall. Ruoyu heard this and said thoughtfully, "It makes sense where the hint of pattern is used. It needs a person with great mathematical ability." Yes. Phone Buja nodded and continued. The thing indicated by the hint may not necessarily be something that requires a specific skill to solve, but when such a thing appears, it means that the puzzle that requires a specific skill to solve is nearby. Understood, Ruoyu said and glanced at the wine rack again. In that case, I'll leave this Tower of Hanner puzzle to you. I think so too. Phone Bujua said, help me keep an eye on it. If any monsters emerge from the surrounding walls, ceiling, floor, or even the wine bottles when I move the wine bottles, help me slap them. Okay. Ruoyu calmly agreed to this request. Then, Phone Bujua prepared to move the wine bottles. However, he had just picked up the first bottle when he was stunned with a puzzled expression. What's the matter? Ruoyu asked. Phone Bujua did not answer. He just silently turned the wine bottle in his hand and showed the wrapping paper on the bottle to Ruoyu. This is... Ruoyu looked at the wrapping paper, but there was not a single word on it. Brand, name, description, year, there was nothing on it. What was printed on the wrapping paper was a picture. Heh. After thinking for a while, Ruoyu sneered. So that's how it is. Looks like that's how it is. Phone Bujua shrugged and put the wine bottles back on the wine rack. He then walked around Ruoyu and gave up the position in front of the wine rack. Ruoyu did not waste any time. After 2 steps, she picked up the 5 bottles of wine one by one and began to identify the pictures printed on the wine bottles. Now, let's talk about the rules of the so-called Tower of Hanoi game. The game originated from an ancient Indian legend. I won't go into details about the legend here. To put it simply, the rules were to first set up 3 pillars and put a number of discs on one of the pillars. The size of the discs had to be from top to bottom, from small to big. The goal of the game was to move all the discs from one pillar to another pillar, under the premise that only one disc could be moved at a time, and the smaller disc could not be placed on top of the bigger disc. This was not a complicated game. Most people could quickly find the rules of the movement and complete the movement in the shortest time possible. For example, the 3 floors of the wine cellar were equivalent to 3 pillars, and the 5 bottles of wine were equivalent to 5 discs from small to big. The problem was how to differentiate the sizes. Brother Jew thought that he could solve this puzzle because he thought that he could easily distinguish the sizes of the 5 bottles of wine. However, as mentioned above, when he saw the bottles, he realized that he could not decipher the information recorded on the bottles. If the information given here was words, numbers, code, or something like that, or if there was a slight difference in the size and shape of the bottles, Brother Jew would definitely be able to decipher it. Unfortunately, there were 5 paintings printed on the 5 bottles of wine. Needless to say, in the team, only Ruoyu, who owned an art gallery at home, could sort the 5 bottles of wine in front of such a prompt. Okay, it's confirmed. In less than 2 minutes, Ruoyu opened her mouth again. She stretched out her slender finger and gently pointed at the wine bottles in front of her. There are a few small traps in here. At first, I thought they were arranged according to the year of the painting. But soon, I found out that Doucet's Beauty of the Harem was painted in the latter half of the 19th century. This has a certain conflict with the Alyonushka, which was published in 1881. I can't tell which came first, which came later. As she explained to Brother Jew, she was already moving the 5 bottles of wine. After that, I considered the size of the painting, the genre, the style, and even the situation of the painter at that time, but some of the information was already beyond my knowledge. So, I changed my mind and finally found the problem. At this point, she had already placed the 5 bottles of wine in the 5 slots at the top of the wine rack. Just as her hand left the mouth of the bottle, there was a click, and the sound of some kind of mechanism being activated came from the wine rack. Then, the system prompt came. Transfer the 5 bottles of wine to the bottom of the wine rack in the correct order. It seems that I was right. Ruoyu heard the prompt and continued. The original position and distance of the 5 bottles of wine implied that the 5 painters were from 3 different eras and the order of their deaths. So, the basis of the 5 bottles of wine was the lifespan of the 5 painters. After saying that, she did not wait for Brother Jew, who was still in a daze, to say anything. She began to move the wine bottles according to the rules of the Tower of Hanner. In fact, Ruoyu was also a little anxious because after staying in this place full of wine for a while, she was indeed a little drunk. Her cheeks were red, and even her head was a little dizzy. This was not a good sign. Chapter 1225. After confirming the size of the 5 bottles, the next step was relatively simple. As mentioned earlier, the rules of the Tower of Hanner were easy to grasp. There was no reason why Ruoyu couldn't figure it out. After another 3 minutes, the 5 bottles of wine were moved to the bottom row of the wine rack. Theoretically speaking, the number of steps they had to go through was the least. When the last bottle of wine was moved to its place, the sound of gears and machinery suddenly came from the wall beside Ruoyu. Feng Bujue saw this and immediately stepped forward. "Here, let me stand in front." In places where they might encounter danger, Brother Jew would usually rush to the front. It wasn't that he was willing to sacrifice himself, but he believed that this choice was more efficient and safer. Creak, just as Brother Jew and Ruoyu switched positions, the wall at the end of the wine cellar slowly opened. Behind the wall, a dark, narrow corridor appeared. The walls of the corridor looked like they were made of natural stone. The height and width of the corridor were similar to the wine cellar, but the depth was unknown. They couldn't see the end of the corridor. They could only tell that it was winding forward. "This path doesn't seem right." Ruoyu looked inside and said, "The wine cellar below the headmaster's office should be a space between the first and second floor of the school, but this path, it's fine. This means, from here on out, we will enter a subspace." Feng Bujue finished her sentence. "The settings in front of us are obviously independently generated by the system. It doesn't have much to do with the headmaster. If I'm not mistaken, we'll be close to the final plot if we keep moving forward." On the other hand, Xiao Tan and the others were on the other side. Since Brother Jew wasn't present, and Yuqin, who had a flashlight in her hand, took the initiative to lead the way. After leaving the headmaster's office, the 4 of them carefully went down to the first floor. Since the whoosh sound was the sound of a sliding door, their search targets were naturally the rooms with sliding doors. Fortunately, the school was not very spacious. Standing at the top of the stairs and looking left and right, the players discovered the anomaly. At that moment, as far as they could see, the classrooms that had been opened earlier were still open. In other words, those doors had not changed. However, the door of the faculty office that was supposed to be closed had opened at some point in time. That should have been opened by the guys of the field, right? Xiaoten looked at the door and lowered his voice to whisper to his teammates. Based on the fact that he opened the door to the staff office, Phantom Dawn said, "Perhaps he is one of the teachers at this school." "Maybe," Xiaoling said. "But he's definitely not the teacher of grade 2 class A," she explained. "Because he's not one of the 4 adults in the group photo. I think he might be the class president Watanabe when he grows up." And Yuqin turned around and said, "That's possible." Xiaoten nodded. "So far, all the NPCs or monsters that we've seen appear to be the people in the group photo from grade 2 class, right?" "No, there's one. We can't be sure," Phantom Dawn said. "It's the guy who was leaning on the window in the classroom and turned into black fog at the stairs." He paused for half a second to think. "I've seen his face before, and he's not one of the 4 adults in the group photo." He lifted his head to look at his teammates and said darkly, "If that guy is the class president Watanabe, then who is the man on the field?" Xiaotan finished his sentence and fell into deep thought. "No matter who it is, let's move on first." And Yuqin took a deep breath and said, "Phew, let's not talk about the 2 people trapped upstairs. The 2 flashlights we have won't last much longer, so..." Then she moved forward toward the teacher's office. The other 3 did not say anything and followed closely behind her. After a few steps, they reached the door of the teacher's office. And what awaited them was, "Sorry, I'm late. the man in the room said to the players as soon as they appeared. This man was the mysterious man who had been looking up at the school from the field earlier. He spoke quickly, and there was no eerie feeling that was unique to ghosts. Furthermore, he was holding a flashlight in his hand. All these signs pointed to the fact that the man was a living person. "Who are you?" Anuachin asked. "What are you doing?" At this moment, the man was indeed busy with something, but she saw him spread out a few pieces of paper on a desk and used a brush from who knows where to write some strange scribbles on them. "What's wrong?" When he heard Anuachin's question, the man suddenly stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look at the players with suspicion. "You can't remember again? What do you mean?" Xiaotan heard something in the man's words, and he asked tentatively, "Can't remember again? Ah, I see." The man seemed to have confirmed something. He continued, "After all, you've been lost for too long. It's normal for you to forget." "Then, can you explain it to us?" Anuachin, who was confused, asked again. "My name is Shota Tsukamoto, and I'm on my Oji." Tsukamoto lowered his head and continued to work on the task at hand. "Although it may be rude to say this, I still have to tell you, you all died 6 years ago." "What?" When the four heard this, they all had the same reaction. Previously, Feng Bujua's speculation that the players were all ghosts was unfortunately correct. "Don't worry, I'll explain it to you slowly." Tsukamoto's attitude gave people the impression that he was already used to this kind of situation. He continued to draw talismans skillfully while saying, "This matter has to start from the 47th year of the Showa era, which is 26 years ago." When the players heard this, they knew that the appearance of this NPC was likely to mean that the truth of the plot was about to be revealed, so they had no intention of interrupting and listened quietly. In May of that year, there was a fire at Changu Elementary School. Tsukamoto began his narration. The fire wasn't too serious, but it still burned a student to death, and this student was your classmate, Suzuki Takayuki. He paused for a second, as if to give the players time to digest the information, and then continued. Suzuki-kun was burned to death in the warehouse only one door away from the principal's office. Before he died, he knocked on the door desperately for help, but unfortunately, Principal Miyamoto was a drunkard. It happened to be lunch break, and Miyamoto, who had no classes in the afternoon, drank too much and fell asleep in the principal's office. It wasn't until the fire truck drove into the school that Miyamoto woke up, and at that time, Suzuki-kun, who was at the opposite door, had already inhaled too much smoke and was in a state of shock. Then, when the dazed Miyamoto saw the smoke, he instinctively ran away from the fire. He didn't know, even at that time, if he could open the opposite door, there was still time to save Suzuki-kun. However, all of this is just a hypothesis. Suzuki-kun was burned to death in the end, and he became a vengeful spirit because of it. The next day, he killed another classmate in your class, Noguchi Eiji. However, at that time, this case was treated as a missing person case, and I only found out about this after some investigation. Then, on the third day, it happened to be the day of the Sanskrit festival. Even though the town was remote and not famous, it had a long history. Since ancient times, the Mong Shrine had always held its own 3 shrine ceremonies, and this custom had been passed down to the present day. However, the villagers didn't know that the Mong Shrine's ritual that has been passed down for thousands of years was not just to worship Amitabha, Guanyin, and Mahastamaprapta. It was to pray for the 3 bodhisattvas to help the villagers suppress its hostility. When he heard the key word, Phantom Dawn reacted. "What is it?" Note, in Tsukamoto's original Japanese, it could be translated as that child, Yenoka. It is an evil god that is suppressed at Mong Shrine. No one can remember its name, but it is undeniably extremely evil and powerful. When he said that, Tsukamoto seemed to be reminded of something, and his hands paused. Sigh. For some reason, he sighed. Then, on the night of the Sanskrit festival, Miyamoto snuck into the shrine. I believe, at the time, he was probably haunted by Suzuki's specter. Driven by fear and desperation, he ran to the shrine to pray for God's protection. But it was not God that responded to Miyamoto, but it. You mean? And Yuachin heard this and continued. Miyamoto released it. Yes, Miyamoto destroyed the dharma of the three bodhisattvas and tore open the seal that was suppressing it, Tsukamoto said in a low voice. And who regained its freedom, fulfilled its promise, and helped Miyamoto deal with Suzuki's soul. But Miyamoto soon realized that the thing that he had released was far scarier than Suzuki's specter. It first descended on this school at the foot of the mountain. The next day, your homeroom teacher, Mr. Sato, encountered it and lost his mind because of it. Miyamoto didn't hold on for long. 2 days later, he committed suicide at home due to excessive fear. So far, what Tsukamoto said matched the information that Brother Ju found in the old newspaper. However, the content of the newspaper ended there, but Tsukamoto's story was not. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to stop there. Its killing had just begun. Tsukamoto continued. 2 days after Miyamoto's suicide, a bloody case that shocked the whole of Japan happened in this school. It was known as the 520 Massacre. On that day, several teachers and more than a dozen students in this school were killed in extremely cruel ways. When the police arrived at the scene, what they saw was a scene of purgatory on Earth and 7 survivors. At this point, Tsukamoto seemed to have finished his work. He looked up and glanced at the players. Those 7 people were second-year Class A students, which means you guys. Wait, Xiaoling replied. That's not right. There are only 6 of us. To be precise, there are 6 ghosts, Tsukamoto corrected her. I know that. Listen to me, and you'll know why there are only 6 of you left. That, Xiaotan seemed to suddenly remember something and said, about the massacre, you said that it killed everyone, but how did the police close the case? That case, there was no conclusion, Tsukamoto replied. The police finally closed the case with the murderer could not be found. They would rather bear all the pressure of public opinion than publicize the results of their investigation. Why? Xiaotan asked again. I seem to have guessed the reason. At this moment, and Yuechin's expression became a little strange. Oh, what's the reason? Xiaoling also asked curiously. I think. And Yuechin looked at Tsukamoto. It's better for him to tell us. Tsukamoto exhaled through his nostrils and continued. The truth is difficult to accept because the results of the investigation showed that the ones who committed the massacre were the 7 surviving 8-year-old children. At the same time, Feng Bujue and Li Ruo, you were on the same side. The 2 walked quickly in the corridor for 5 or 6 minutes, and then they saw a light in front of them. They quickly approached the light source and found that it was the exit of the corridor. So, the 2 turned off the flashlights in their hands and walked out of the oppressive corridor. When Ruoyu, who was walking behind them, stepped out of the corridor, the mirage-like corridor behind them disappeared. When they looked back, they could only see a few ordinary country roads, and the scenery that appeared in front of them was the gate of Chongjiu Elementary School. Oh, is this another illusion? Feng Bujue looked at the bright sun above his head and the school in front of him, and said with a smile, That's for sure. Ruoyu continued, Let's not talk about the time factor. It's impossible for the sun to rise so soon. In terms of space, we are now outside of Chongjiu Elementary School. If this is not an illusion, then we have already passed the level, right? Then, Brother Bujue continued, Let's go in and take a look. Let's go, Ruoyu responded. After the 2 of them finished talking, they walked into the daytime version of Chongjiu Primary School. Chapter 12:26. After they stepped through the school gate, there was a small field on their left, and on their right was the education block. The door to the education block looked familiar. After taking a few steps closer, they realized that it was the exit door that they had seen in the night version of the school. At that moment, the door was open. When they were about 8 meters away from it, Brother Ju and Ruo, you could already smell the stench of blood drifting out from it. Humph! Looks like this part of the plot is a bit weird. Before they entered the education block, Brother Ju reminded them, even though there are not that many combat scenes in the limited scenario, the margin for error is lower than in a normal scenario. You have to be careful. It's fine. Ruayu replied calmly. After all, I've already solved the puzzle that only the source can solve. Even if I die now, it won't affect us clearing the scenario. She paused. But you should be careful. As the two conversed, they had already entered the education block. The scene in the corridor was horrifying. If there was a scale of brutality in a murder scene, then the scene before them would definitely belong to the bloodbath category. Just as they stepped through the door, they saw two dead bodies, and they were the bodies of children. Without taking a closer look, it was obvious that the two young bodies were covered with many ghastly wounds. It was as if they had been attacked by some kind of beast in the corridor. Their extremely twisted faces seemed to be telling the witnesses of the great pain and terror that they had experienced before they died. As they walked further in, there were many bloodstains on the floor that extended all the way inwards. Feng Bujua naturally did not hesitate because of this. He strode forward like nothing had happened. Ruayu frowned when she saw this, but she did not say anything. She just followed Brother Ju closely. They soon reached the first corner, and here, Brother Ju stopped moving. Feng Bujua looked at the wall and said, "The altar that was embedded in the wall has disappeared." "That's more like it," Ruayu said. "In the real world, why would there be an altar in a school? This is not a question of whether it is normal or not." Brother Ju said, "I believe this change can only mean two possibilities. One, the place that we were at earlier was actually a ghost world, and this place is the school in real life. Two, whether it is real or not, in terms of time, we might be in the past Zhong Geo Elementary School. So at this point in time, there is no such thing as the altar. Then, is there a third possibility?" Ruayu thought about it and said, "The altars that we saw earlier were placed there by the system. Just like the mechanism at the Tower of Hanover, they were created to create puzzles and push the plot forward." Hearing that, Feng Bujua chuckled. "I do hope that what you said is true. That would save us a lot of trouble." "What do you mean?" Ruayu heard something from his words, and she asked with confusion. "Think about it. If this altar is something like a treasure chest that the system placed to push the progress of the scenario, then it is just a tool, and there is nothing to study." Feng Bujua said, "But if that's not the case, it means that this altar and the strange puppet inside it are related to some kind of plot." "I get it now." Ruayu caught up to Brother Ju's train of thought and immediately said, "What you're worried about is, at this stage of the scenario, we still have no clue about the plot of the puppet. That could be a hidden danger." "That's right." Feng Bujua nodded and then turned around to walk down the corridor. "Therefore, I sincerely hope that the plot that we encounter next will be able to explain this matter clearly." He smiled. "If the puppet can jump out and yell, 'I'm the big boss, come and fight me,' that will be the best." "Yes," Ruayu said expressionlessly. "Even though I think the chance of that happening is close to zero, I wish you the best of luck." As they spoke, the two of them walked further into the corridor between the biology classroom and the second-year Class B. At that moment, the doors of both classrooms were open, and there was sound coming out from the biology classroom. Therefore, Brother Ju and Ruayu both turned to look into the biology classroom, and this was what they saw. A man in a white lab coat, or rather, a male corpse, was lying on a lab table with his face up. His chest was open, and a few of his ribs were exposed like flower petals. His internal organs and blood were all over the table. There was also a boy who looked about 7 or 8 years old. He was kneeling on the corpse's abdomen, holding a pair of pliers and a knife. He was immersed in some kind of carpentry work. Judging from the expression on his face, he seemed to be enjoying himself. "This is Sasuda, right?" It only took Feng Bujua 1 second to recognize that the boy on the lab table was in the group photo. However, Brother Ju did not say with certainty that the boy in front of them was Sasuda because there was no name in the group photo. Since the adult version of the students in Year 2 Class A had been loaded by the players, they looked like each other in the eyes of the players. Therefore, it was impossible to compare the appearance of the adult version with that of their childhood. As a result, the players could confirm that other than Suzuki and Noguchi, the other 4 boys were Sasuda, Yamada, and Watanabe. However, they could not tell who was who. This scene, could it have happened in the past? On the other hand, Ruo Yu was surprised by the situation in the biology classroom. When she asked this question, her tone was one of disbelief. This does not make sense. On the other hand, Feng Bujue had started to consider this question from a technical point of view. Even if we can explain Sasuda's motive by saying that he was a psychopathic murderer when he was 8 years old, objectively speaking, it would have been very difficult for him to complete this crime. Even if he succeeded in poisoning the biology teacher with the strength of an 8-year-old child, how did he move the corpse onto the lab table? Did the biology teacher voluntarily lie down on the table for him to dissect? Regardless of how they viewed the problem from different angles, both of their questions were answered after 3 seconds. At that moment, Brother Ju and Ruo Yu both caught a glimpse of a moving shadow in the corridor at the same time. Both of them turned their heads and saw a little girl around the age of 7 or 8. She was dragging an adult's corpse with one hand as she slowly walked out of the toilet. The student from Tokugawa Nunnery is quite strong. Even at this moment, Feng Bujue was still able to joke with a relaxed tone. The way she dragged the corpse with one hand reminds me of Triangular-Headed, a monster in Silent Hill. Of course, the two of them are much smaller in size. Just like the boys, it was impossible to tell who the 3 girls in the group photo were. The reason Brother Ju guessed that the girl was from Tokugawa Nunnery was because he recognized that the body that was being dragged was the music teacher. These kids, Ruo Yu was still quite serious. She did not play along with Brother Ju's joke. Instead, she said seriously, there is an 80% chance that they are possessed by something, or perhaps they are under the control of some powerful evil spirit. Feng Bujue added, in any case, we just have to keep watching. If I'm not mistaken, after this plot, the thing that is controlling them will show up. Brother Ju was obviously very familiar with the plot of the nightmare scenario. He gradually realized that this was similar to a death scene, but this content was not presented in the form of a cinematic, but in the form of a substitute spectator. Come on, let's take a look at the situation in the other rooms. After Tokugawa Nunnery dragged the female body into the music classroom, Feng Bujue turned back to look at Ruo Yu and signaled for her to follow him. Are we? Ruo Yu hesitated and glanced into the biology classroom. Are we not going to do anything about it? This is something that has already happened. There is no need to do anything about it. Feng Bujue replied. This plot is meant for us to watch, and we should be thankful that we only need to watch because I don't think we can win if we have to fight. With these words, he began to walk forward. Ruo Yu thought about it for 2 seconds and did not say anything. She silently followed Brother Ju. Long story short, in the next 10 minutes, the two looked through the entire school. Other than the warehouse door opposite the principal's office and the entrance to the secret wine cellar, all the other doors were open. The scenes in the rooms that were open were similar. Simply put, it was a scene of a student from grade 2 class, happily disposing of a corpse in a very cruel way. Some of the corpses belonged to adults, while others belonged to children. Some were complete, while others were incomplete. In any case, after looking around, it was basically confirmed that there were only 7 living people left in the school. And those 7 people were the 6-year 2 Class A members that the players played as, in the class monitor, Watanabe. I understand now. 10 minutes later, after exploring the 2nd floor, Feng Bujue, who returned to the corridor on the 1st floor, said thoughtfully, through this plot, we have obtained 2 very important pieces of information. First, we have matched the names and faces of the children in the group photo. Ruo, you continued. Second, we have learned that a massacre happened in this school, and the murderers were the characters we played as. Correct. Feng Bujue snapped his fingers and continued. Then, here comes the question. How did these 7 little devils escape from the law back then? And what was the thing that controlled them? Just as Brother Ju said this sentence, suddenly, it is it. A strange voice responded to Feng Bujue. Brother Ju and Ruo Yu looked toward the direction of the voice and saw a figure appeared at the corner of the corridor. You are. Feng Bujue recognized the man who was standing on the field before. My name is Shota Tsukamoto. On my OG, Tsukamoto replied. Oh. Feng Bujue responded casually. Is that so? You brought us here? Yes, Tsukamoto replied. With my current strength, this is all I can do. What do you mean by your current strength? Fong Buju asked. What is this situation? Can you explain it to us? Perhaps it will be difficult for you to accept, but please believe me. Tsukamoto replied. What you saw just now was a reality that happened in the past. I know you don't remember it, but we believe you. Fong Buju interrupted him and said very calmly, Go on. Tsukamoto was a little stunned. This is what happened. At this moment, your real bodies are actually in the classroom of Grade 2 Class A, but your souls were brought into an illusion by it. You mean, Ruo, you continued, the space we were in was also an illusion? Yes, Tsukamoto replied. The Chunkyu Elementary School you were in before and the Chunkyu Elementary School you are in now are all illusions created by it. It wants to use your souls to unlock its seal again. Oh, how do we use it? Fong Bujue asked. When you were over there, you saw the altar, right? Tsukamoto asked. I saw it. Brother Ju's answer was concise and to the point. That altar was a seal created by my master, Tsukamoto continued. Seal what? It? Then what exactly is it? Who is your master? Brother Ju asked a few more questions in succession. That's a long story, Tsukamoto replied. It's fine. Take your time. We're not in a hurry, Fong Bujua said. Tsukamoto nodded, thought for a moment, and said, This matter has to start from 26 years ago, he began his narration. The description at the beginning was the same as what Tsukamoto had said on the other side, but he did not mention that Brother Ju and the rest were ghosts. After he finished talking about it in the 520 massacre, Tsukamoto continued. After the massacre, the higher-ups of the Metropolitan Police Department secretly found my master, Mage Nara, and asked him to deal with the evil spirit in this school, which is it. Although my master's skills were very high, it was too scary. On the night of the exorcism, when my master entered this school, he realized that it was far stronger than he had imagined. He could not destroy it with his own power, but at that time, he could not escape even if he wanted to. So, my master could only try his best to seal it on the spot. After that night, my master, who was not even 50 years old, had white hair overnight. His legendary clear, bright hunting clothes was also tainted by the evil spirit and was burned by him in the end. After that, my master lived in seclusion in the temple and taught us disciples wholeheartedly. He did not go out to exorcise the spirits. Until one night, 20 years later, that night he suddenly gathered me and my seniors in front of his bed and told us. Chapter 12:27. Tsukamoto said, Master told us that he had foreseen that his life was coming to an end, and his biggest regret in his life was that he couldn't destroy it. Although Master sealed it on the spot back then, this seal is far from the original seal in the Mong Shrine. The original seal was made by a great Onmyoji in ancient times, and it was very stable. Every year, the villagers would hold a Sansha shrine ceremony and use the power of the three bodhisattvas to strengthen the power of the seal. However, Master Seal was far from that effect. He knew that sooner or later, this seal would be broken by it. When that time comes, the people would be plunged into misery and suffering. So, before Master passed away, he entrusted the task of eliminating it to us disciples. He hoped that we would cultivate diligently, and one day, we would be able to destroy it completely. When he said this, he shook his head and sighed. The next day, Master passed away. Unexpectedly, as soon as he passed away, the senior brothers began to fight for the position and legacy he left behind. They didn't take Master's instructions to heart at all. But you were different, right? Fong Buju asked. Tsukamoto nodded. After that, I prepared for 2 months. I picked a time and a day and came to Chongjio Elementary School. He paused for a moment. It was 6 years ago in the summer. Since the school had been abandoned for a long time, I was able to get in easily. I remember very clearly at noon in the middle of summer, when I walked into the school, all the hair on my body stood on end. Obviously, even in a sealed state, it could still exert influence on the surrounding space. Wait, Ruayu interrupted. If it was so powerful that even Master Nara at his peak couldn't destroy it, then at that time, weren't you trying to break a rock with an egg? I didn't say that 6 years ago I came to destroy it, Tsukamoto replied. I just want to confirm how strong it is so that I can know how far I have to go in order to complete my master's task. Oh, when Feng Bujua heard that, he laughed lightheartedly. So, you chose a relatively safe time to come to Chongjiu Primary School and assumed that it, who is in a sealed state, will not be able to do anything to you. Ah, in the end, that reconnaissance mission. As he spoke, Oki Tsukamoto tilted his head, caused you to end up like this. Sigh. Hearing this, Tsukamoto let out another long sigh. Now that things have come to this, I don't care what kind of ending I will end up with. He said solemnly. It has been 6 years. My body has undoubtedly decayed, and my soul has been trapped in this yang illusion, unable to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Why did it just trap you and not do anything else to you? When Feng Bujua asked this question, his tone was somewhat subtle. It was as if he was saying, why haven't you been tortured to a pulp yet? Before today, I didn't know why, but Tsukamoto's expression changed slightly, and he replied, just now I understood. He looked at Brother Ju and Ruayu respectively. At this moment, your 4 companions in the Yin illusion are gradually unsealing themselves under the guidance of it disguised as Shoyuta. Tsukamoto, oh, I see. Hearing this very urgent information, Brother Ju appeared to be calm as usual. He was not in a hurry to ask how to return to the Yin illusion. Instead, he chose to clarify all the information that could be ascertained. So, it kept your soul in order to pretend to be you? Yes, Tsukamoto replied. The soul of a Onmyoji is different from that of an ordinary person. If an ordinary person's soul is unable to enter the cycle of reincarnation, it will be lost, decayed, perished, or even demonized. However, no matter how long Onmyoji has been dead, they will not be lost. Not only can our soul retain our memories, but our appearance will also not change much from when we were alive. It took advantage of this. It used me, who was trapped in Yang side, to create a mirror image of my soul in the Yin side, and possessed it to deceive your companions. I see. Feng Bujua pondered for a few seconds to organize his thoughts. Then, he said, by the way, there is one more thing that I haven't figured out. There were a total of 7 people who survived that year, and there are only 6 people present today. So, where did Class Monitor Watanabe go? At the same time, in the Yin illusion, Xiao Tan and the other 3 returned to the 2nd floor under Tsukamoto's lead and entered the principal's office. Brother Ju, are you guys okay? Once he entered the door, Xiao Tan rushed to the entrance of the wine cellar and yelled down the floor. But no one answered him. What's going on? And Yuachin walked over and asked anxiously, did something happen to them? At that moment, Tsukamoto suddenly said, your companions are no longer there. You mean? Phantom Dawn looked at Tsukamoto. There already. He did not finish his sentence, but waited for Tsukamoto to continue. Phantom Dawn had obviously paid attention to this. His half a sentence was a good test. From the perspective of a player, he could confirm the survival status of his 2 teammates through the team tab, but the NPC monster did not know that. Therefore, if this guy who called himself a Yin-Yang master said confidently that his 2 teammates had been killed by it, then he was lying on purpose. At that moment, Xiao Tan, Xiao Ling, and Yuechin understood the meaning behind Phantom Dawn's words, so they remained silent and waited to see what would happen. I only know that temporarily, their souls have not been destroyed, and they are no longer in the wine cellar. Tsukamoto's answer did not have any loopholes. Then where have they gone? Xiao Ling asked. You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Tsukamoto replied. I can only sense that their souls are still in this space, but as for where they have been taken, only it knows. Then, how should we save them? Xiao Tan pressed. That's not necessary, Tsukamoto replied coldly. The 6 of you are already dead. What is there to save? As long as it still exists, you and all the other souls here will not be able to leave this space. He paused for a moment. The only way to get rid of this fate is to destroy it. Before he finished, Xiao Tan suddenly said, "When did this drawer open?" When Tsukamoto spoke, Xiao Tan's eyes had noticed something. When the players came down the stairs, the drawer inside the headmaster's office was still closed, but now, the drawer had been moved open. It had been unlocked. "Be careful, this might be a trap." Phantom Dawn was very cautious. For some reason, after he parted with Brother Ju and the rest, Phantom Dawn had a strange instinct. This instinct kept telling him to be on guard. "Let me do it." At that moment, Tsukamoto took 2 steps forward and said matter-of-factly, "You have to protect yourselves. To complete the final magic circle, we'll need at least 5 people." As he spoke, he had already pulled the drawer open. The situation inside the drawer was similar to the 2 classrooms that the players had explored earlier. There were 4 items in total. Let's go through them one by one. First, it was a plot item that could be taken out of the scenario. Item name, tassel belt item type, plot item quality, normal function, unknown, can be taken out of the scenario. Yes remark, made from linen. The buckle is made from pure silver. The purple coloring and the length of the tassel are the highlight of the design. This was another wearable item. Similar to the others, its purpose was unknown. Then came the second item. Item name, its spleen item type, plot item quality, normal function, can be embedded into its body, can be taken out of the scenario. No remark, a pocket-sized organ made from green jade. It is radiating with spiritual energy. There was no explanation. The third item was a piece of paper. It looked like an unfinished letter. The handwriting showed that the writer was very nervous, or perhaps the writer's hand was shaking due to some other physical reason. However, the content of the paper was still recognizable. "Sato-kun, I have no idea whether your mental illness is temporary or permanent. If it is permanent, then this letter is my confession to myself. But if one day you can regain your sanity and read this letter, I only wish to say one thing to you. I am sorry. I'm not a good headmaster. In fact, I'm not even a decent man. After my wife died, I tried to numb myself with alcohol, and I fell into the habit of alcoholism. It is because of this habit that I am in my current state. Suzuki Noguchi, I do not know how many more people will die because of this, but I cannot hold on any longer. Please forgive me. Forgive me for using death to escape my responsibility. Because of it." The message on the paper stopped there. After the word "it," the letter was also written in Japanese, so it was a word instead of a character. There was nothing else, no punctuation or anything else. Finally, the fourth item. I believe you can guess what it is: storage key. Several minutes later, the players and Tsukamoto arrived at the corridor outside the headmaster's office. Tsukamoto did not take the 2 quest items. He handed them to the players for safekeeping. However, he took the key because he took the initiative to take on the task of opening the door. As mentioned earlier, the door of the storage room opened horizontally. Tsukamoto inserted the key, turned and pushed, and the door opened. Surprisingly, there was light in this room. There was a light bulb hanging from the ceiling of the storage room, and this light bulb emitted a red light. The light enveloped the space of less than 30 square meters in front of them. It was like a fire. Contrary to the name storage room, the room was empty. Not only was there no furniture or debris, there was not even a window. Other than the light bulb above, there was only the wall. There was not even a light switch on the wall. However, there were some anomalies. For example, the 6 walls of the storage room were made of charred wood. In addition, there was a magic circle drawn on the floor. This array was not the kind of magic array in Western mythology, but something with a lot of Eastern characteristics. On the whole, the magic circle was drawn by some kind of red liquid, but whether it was blood, paint, or something else, it was hard to tell, because the magic circle looked like it had been drawn for a long time, and the liquid had already dried. In the middle of the magic circle, there was a circle the size of a wash basin. There was a bunch of scribbled Japanese words. The words were written from the inside out in a spiral shape, and the system didn't translate them. Outside the circle, there was a circle. Outside the circle, there were 4 lines of the 8 trigrams. In the area divided by the lines, there were many incantations. Of course, There were also some words that the players couldn't understand. After seeing those things, Phantom Dawn was the first to ask, "What is this on the ground?" "I drew this 6 years ago," Tsukamoto answered. "Oh, right? You don't remember anymore." These two sentences seemed to have triggered something else. Then Tsukamoto, who was in the middle of the door, started to narrate the story. This Tsukamoto's story was different from the one that Brother Ju and the rest had encountered. 6 years ago, with the invitation of your class monitor, Watanabe, you returned to Chongjio Elementary School to join the so-called class reunion. At the time, naturally, you had no memory of the 520 tragedy, because after that incident, the government forced the 7 of you to be quarantined for so-called psychological treatment. 1 year later, when you returned to your parents' side, you had already lost that memory. After that, your families were arranged by the government to live in a faraway place. In your memories, there was nothing unusual about your childhood. It was only because the school was about to be closed that everyone transferred to another school in the 2nd grade. Then, you grew up on your own. When you reached the age of 28, all of you had left home to live on your own. Those around you who know about your relationship with that matter also think that the nightmarish experience of the past has long been covered up. No one would have thought that one summer, when all of you were coincidentally free, the class monitor in your memory, Watanabe, would send you an invitation letter to a class reunion. Perhaps it was fate, or it was the arrangement of it. The 6 of you gathered at the abandoned Chongjio Elementary School on Een Day. That day, your class monitor did not show up because he was already under the control of it. The letter he sent was to lure the 6 of you here. Chapter 1228. The result, without a doubt, was that summer, all of you died at Chongjio Elementary School. As Tsukamoto narrated, he pasted the talismans that he had prepared on the 4 walls of the room. Then, how did you get involved in this? Inuechin asked. Simple. The police invited me, Tsukamoto replied. After all of you are living humans, and you have all kinds of social connections. Someone would have reported you missing for too long. Furthermore, all 6 of your names have been specially reported to the government. So, on the 4th day after you disappeared, someone came to find me. In other words, you've already been here 6 years ago, and you've already made contact with us? Xiaotan asked. Yes, Tsukamoto replied. At the time, all of you had not been lost here for too long, and you remember everything that happened when you were alive. Furthermore, all of you have recovered the memories that you lost when you were young. That day, I acted with your help and guidance, so everything went smoothly. Even a magic circle was drawn. However, just as we were about to activate the magic circle to destroy it, it came. Logically speaking, while it is sealed, it can deal with normal people like you. However, with the yin-yang master like me here, it can't do anything. However, it has been forced into a desperate situation, and it has no choice but to stake everything on this one throw. It sacrificed its liver, spleen, and lungs as the price to forcefully activate its power and pull a part of my soul out of my body. If a yin-yang master's soul is damaged, it will greatly affect his cultivation, and I was unable to find a solution. Helpless, I could only give up on the ritual and escape on my own. I promised all of you that, when I recovered, I would come back to save all of you. At this point, Tsukamoto shook his head. However, I did not expect that. I would have to wait for 6 years, so when I saw you, I said, "Sorry, I'm late." After he said that, everyone was silent for a moment. Then, Xiaoling asked, "Your soul is fine now?" "No, it is not," Tsukamoto replied coldly. "Don't you feel that I have been a bit too calm?" Now that he put it that way, that was indeed the case. Indeed. He's so calm that he reminds me of another person, Phantom Dawn said with narrowed eyes. "Actually, this is not my original personality," Tsukamoto continued. "It's because I've lost a part of my soul." He paused. "No matter how much time has passed, the part of my soul that has been taken away can't be replaced. So, in the past 6 years, I haven't been looking for a way to repair my soul. Instead, I've been practicing Taoist magic that can still exert power in an incomplete state." At this point, His eyes became unusually determined. Today we must succeed. As long as we destroy it, everything will be set right. Not only will I be able to recover, all of you and all of the lost souls trapped here by it will be freed. At the same time, in the illusory realm of Yang. It's here. Shota Tsukamoto led Brother Ju and Ruoyu out of the school. They came to a small mountain path outside and stopped in front of a red torii. After passing through that torii, we can return to the inside. Do you want to come with us? Ruoyu raised her head to look at the torii in front of them before turning back to ask. Of course, Tsukamoto replied. You won't be able to escape with your own power. That is strange. At this time, Feng Bujue also turned around to look at Tsukamoto. Since you knew that we could pass through this torii, why didn't you come to us earlier? Do you think I didn't want to? Tsukamoto replied. In the past 6 years, I have traveled to another illusory realm more than once, but it was useless. It would quickly find me and send me back. Moreover, every time I traveled, it would cause me great harm. He sighed. Right now, my power is already very weak. If I do as you say, it's very likely that I'll be controlled by it before I even meet you. Oh, Brother Ju went along with what Tsukamoto said. So, you used the last of your power to lead us here. We would first contact you, and then follow us. Yes. Tsukamoto nodded. Feng Bujue pondered for a few seconds. Then, let's not waste any time. Let's go. After saying that, the three of them passed through the torii in front of them. At that moment, the light suddenly dimmed and the temperature dropped. In the blink of an eye, the three of them were trapped in darkness. The next second, Feng Bujue calmly turned on the flashlight in his hand. Then, the first floor corridor of the night version of Changgu Elementary School appeared in front of them. Oh, so this is where we will be after the teleportation. Brother Ju immediately looked back. At this time, behind them was the shrine. But, where did that puppet go? The moment their eyes met, Feng Bujue discovered that the puppet in the shrine was no longer there. Of course, it has transformed into my appearance and is moving around. Tsukamoto's face was very pale at this time. He leaned against the wall and looked like he was about to lose his balance. It seemed that what he said earlier about transmigrating would cause great harm to me seemed to be true. Come, let me help you walk. Feng Bujue still looked methodical. He took 2 steps forward and stretched out an arm to steady Tsukamoto. Where should we go next? They must be in a warehouse on the 2nd floor. Tsukamoto replied. The spell formation to break the seal is there. It was formed by it using the blood of all the people who died here. I have tried to destroy the spell formation more than once, but I was stopped by it every time. Moreover, every time I saw the spell formation, I noticed that it was more complete. He panted heavily, his face pale. If it tricked your companions into the spell formation and started the ritual, then all 4 of them would become sacrifices. In the real world, they would immediately die of blood loss. Their blood would restore its 3 organs. At that time, it would have enough power to break my master's seal. Hearing this, Feng Bujue immediately looked up and exchanged glances with Ruoyu. Ruoyu understood what he meant. She immediately turned on her flashlight and led the way. Feng Bujue supported Tsukamoto and followed as quickly as possible. The 3 of them went to the warehouse on the 2nd floor. Chapter 1229. Hold everything. Just as the players on the 2nd floor of the warehouse were about to walk up to the designated spots for the illusion Tsukamoto, someone suddenly shouted in English from outside the door. The only person who would shout such a line at such a time was Brother Ju. His words, not only did he control the situation, but it also indirectly confirmed his identity. Because even if it could impersonate Feng Bujue, it would never speak in a foreign language. What's going on? However, just 2 seconds later, when Feng Bujue, Li Ruoyu, and Tsukamoto Shota walked into the warehouse, everyone was stunned. At that moment, all 8 of them were silent. The 2 Tsukamoto Shota looked at each other with a complicated expression. One of them had a pale face, an exhausted expression, and seemed to be extremely weak. The other had a solemn expression, a firm gaze, and seemed to be rather calm. "Brother Ju, what's going on?" Xiaodan was a little confused. He quickly looked at Feng Bujue and asked, "It's nothing." Feng Bujue replied, "We came to a mirror dimension and met this yin-yang master, Mr. Tsukamoto Shoda." He paused for half a second before continuing. "He told us that it is impersonating a fake Tsukamoto and is leading my friends into a trap." As soon as he said that, Xiao Tan and the others instinctively took a few steps back, distancing themselves from Tsukamoto. "You've been deceived." The fake Tsukamoto was still very calm. He looked at Brother Ju and said, "He's the fake one. He's a part of my soul that it extracted from my body and transformed into him." "Oomph." The weaker Tsukamoto snorted. "Whatever you say, even if I have to risk my life, I won't let you get away with it. Today, I'm prepared to die." "You're quite good at acting," the calm Tsukamoto replied. "I'll return the same words to you." The weak Tsukamoto was not to be outdone. The two of them were at daggers drawn, opposing each other with equal harshness. In the eyes of the two groups of players, the words and actions of the Tsukamoto that they met, there were no obvious flaws. Even if there were many parts of the two men's story that made sense, the players could not find any evidence to prove that there was a flaw in their story. Are you trying to play the Monkey King?" After a few seconds of confrontation, Feng Bujue ridiculed with a smile. Then, he turned to look at the person he was supporting. "Tsukamoto, please sit for a while. I have something to discuss with my companions." After saying that, he didn't care whether the other party agreed or not, and just let go. "Wait a moment. Now isn't the time to be doing such things." The weakened Tsukamoto responded emotionally. "Oi, do you know what you're doing?" The calm Tsukamoto said to his brother Ju, "We have to hurry up and seal it." A new sigh, Japanese for long-winded. At this moment, Feng Bujue suddenly roared, interrupting the two men. "Both of you better behave yourselves. We'll decide who's real and who's fake. Whoever dares to stop us from communicating with words or actions, I'll beat him up until he turns into Hawking." His almost hysterical shout stunned the two Tsukamoto. The two of them had no choice but to shut up and stand there staring at each other. Therefore, in the next 5 minutes, Brother Ju used very concise language to explain the information that he and Ruo Yu had obtained in the illusion of Yang. Then, Inuechin used her professional editing skills to explain the information that the Tsukamoto had given her in the illusion of Yin. She also pointed out the differences between the information provided by the two Tsukamoto. After the exchange, Feng Bujue was silent for about a minute. Finally, an evil smile appeared on his face. Those who were familiar with him knew that this expression usually meant that someone was going to be in trouble. "Okay, we're done discussing." After discussing with his teammates and exchanging items, Feng Bujue turned around and looked at the two Tsukamoto. "Now, I'd like to hear your opinions." He paused for half a second and looked at the calmer Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yin. "First, Mokomoto-kun, I'd like to confirm your theory." Brother Ju's tone was very relaxed. "You said that we've been dead for a long time, but you're still alive. Now, you want us to help you activate the magic circle in the room to destroy it, right?" "Yes," Tsukamoto replied. Feng Bujue nodded, then looked at the Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang. "So, Mokomoto-kun, your theory is that you're dead, but the 6 of us are still alive, and we still have a chance to escape, right?" "Yes," the other Tsukamoto replied. "Then what do you want us to do?" Feng Bujue asked. "You've already got its lungs, liver, and spleen, haven't you?" Tsukamoto replied. "Those are the fragments of power that it tried to scatter all over the space. You just need to put those 3 things into the altar and seal it, then you can open the door and escape. After you get out, you must find a powerful yin-yang master and bring them here." "He's talking nonsense." At this time, the calm Tsukamoto interrupted. "Those 3 organs are indeed fragments of power, but it's right to put them outside the altar. Putting them back will help it recover its power. He's the one who's talking nonsense." The weak Tsukamoto shouted at the top of his lungs. "He said that to trap you. He lied that you're all dead so that you can help him complete the ritual." The two of them started arguing, and before they knew it, they were arguing. Feng Bujua looked on coldly from the side, and there was even a smile on his lips at this moment. Brother Ju knew very well that the scenario had reached its final stage, and the choice before him would decide the ending of this nightmare. Of course, he didn't know the specific plot arrangement, but he had a rough idea. First, if the players chose to believe in Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang, then the Een Master would immediately turn evil, and then the players would, with the help of the Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang, use the 3 pieces of jade that they collected earlier to escape from the school. Finally, the Tsukamoto Bento would be followed by an ending cinematic. Second, if the players chose to believe in Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang, then the Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang would turn evil and trigger a boss battle. Similarly, the players would rely on Tsukamoto's help and the 3 pieces of jade to defeat the boss and leave after watching the cinematic. The difference between these 2 scenarios was obvious from the information given by the NPCs. According to the Tsukamoto in the illusion of Yang, it was so powerful that it had to escape in the end. According to the Een Master, even though it was powerful, it was weakened by the seal. Furthermore, Tsukamoto was not someone to be trifled with, so he would be killed in the end. To put it bluntly, no matter which one they chose to believe, they would clear the scenario. The only difference was the difficulty. However, Feng Bujua had a different plan. This was because he still remembered that there was a hidden mission in this scenario. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.